call to order the public hearing and regular session, Cape Charles Civic Center, 500 Tazewell Avenue, June 1st, 2021. Gonna have a call to order, roll call for the
Grossman present.
McCoy present.
Stroh present.
Holloway present.
Buda present.
Diaco present.
we have a quorum.
I get a roll call, Cape Charles Town Council.
O'Brien present.
Palmer present.
Holloway present.
Grossman present.
But no witness established.
All right, I'd like to introduce our new town planner. This is Ben Sullivan. Welcome.
Thank you.
At this time, we'll stand for an invocation, a moment of silence. Join me in the pledge. Pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The Cape Charles Planning Commission and Town Council will hold a joint public hearing on Tuesday, June 1st, 2021 at 6 p.m. in the Cape Charles Civic Center, 500 Tazewell Avenue, to receive comments on proposed text amendments to the Cape Charles zoning ordinance. A, Article 2, definitions. B, Article 8, historic district overlay. These two items will be discussed at the regular meeting of the Planning Commission immediately following the public hearing and brought to a vote for recommendation to the Cape Charles Town Council. Do we have anybody that signed up?
I don't have anyone signed up, but I do have two that were submitted. Proposal. Historic District Review Board. First, I think the board should have guidelines for themselves before they consider guidelines for the homeowners of Cape Charles. By this, I mean they should remember 3 words in their decision-making: reasonable, practical, and consistent. Everyone knows that when you buy historic or not, a budget is most always in the thinking of the new homeowners. Most time, that budget is the determining factor in the upgrades being made. The board should never assume there are unlimited funds, which I have the sense they do assume this, so guidelining themselves should be their primary goal before each meeting. Contributing and non-contributing, well, that goes a long way in the determination of how far the board takes their guidelines. As far as telling a homeowner what they can or cannot use is a little too finite. As far as what width siding they have to use or what thickness is going a little too far. And hardy board, as opposed to other materials that are just as durable and still looks the same as the rest in the neighborhood, seems reasonable and practical to me. Chimneys, have heard that some are allowed and some have been turned down for removal. Makes no sense. Inside a residence that has no function and impedes passage through a doorway, denied. As long as the above roof level can be seen, why can't the inside part be removed? Has no function, cannot be seen from the outside, and has no function. Some had been approved and others denied. Makes no sense. If a home is on the registry of historic home, then I think someone, be it the real estate agent, the town, or town planner, should make the homeowner aware of differences in the guidelines that apply. Not everyone is savvy when it comes to what the differences are in contributing and non-contributing guidelines. I do think that the board should take seriously and consider that everyone who buys a house here doesn't have unlimited resources to buy the most expensive materials, but does have the possibility to get a good quality product for a lot less money and still make a presentable look to their house. Submitted by Janet Dudley. This is Edward Wells, HDRB Chairman. June 1st, 2021. I would like to address the mayor, town council, planning board, and town manager. I would like to thank you all for your time and efforts put into the town. I would first like to start by stating some facts about the Historic Review Board, HDRB. From May of 2020 until today, June 1st, 2021, 1 year's time, we held 18 total meetings, 103 total pre-applications, and final certificates of appropriateness, 1,892 total pages of documents, plans, diagrams, photos, and material descriptions. I and the board personally have spent hours not only reading through this material, but also physically inspecting applicants' properties, not trespassing. All of this time and effort, and only one appeal to council. My point being, I believe we on the board are cognizant of the facts of evolving building practices and materials. I believe we are working with the town residents and businesses in a fair and reasonable manner on a case-by-case basis. I do not agree with having one gratuitous meeting, a questionable survey, and a preconceived notion of a historic philosophy. I do not agree with some of the Cape Charles Historic District guiding philosophy. Some of the assumptions are not consistent with current guidelines. We, HDRB, do not stop homeowners or business owners from making changes to their property, which is implied in the new philosophy. I never considered HDRB guidelines as law, again implied. To start changing current wording in the guidelines, specifically synthetic material, and using the appropriate metric, that it has a genuine, authentic appearance such that a typical observer would not be able to discern a visual difference from the original material design from any public right-of-way. This metric is too broad a scope. What is a typical observer? What is in historical appearance is one may not be to another. It has the potential for too many different opinions in which we try to base conclusions on. I think the guidelines should be revised and updated by persons with an architectural historic background, along with historic renovators, builders, and contractors with backgrounds with building materials and uses. In the current guidelines, in the introduction, it states these guidelines are tailored to your community. They are based on extensive study of Cape Charles Historic District, including the types of buildings in the district, their condition, and the current policies and goals of the town. Thank you, Ed Wells. And that is all I have.
Thank you.
I'll make a motion that we close public hearing.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Can I do a motion for town council to adjourn? All in favor? Opposed?
So long.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Who was the one who seconded that motion to close?
I don't know whether it was my,
No, because it was Mr. Grossman who motioned to close for a public hearing, and then
Mike.
Mike.
Okay.
Mike did, yeah. I don't know whether you're referring to the, which, planning commission or
They-
council.
that's their own.
Council,
All
I
right.
heard two people.
Public comments. Do we have any public comments? Consent agenda. Do I have approval of the agenda format?
I would like to make a change.
Okay.
I would like to recommend that we remove 6A for many of the reasons stated by our chairperson of the HDRB, but also because there are things missing that are really critical, and several of them are: one, a map showing the boundaries and specifically showing the contributing and non-contributing structures. And two, it refers constantly to standards and guidelines, but if we're going to use the same standards and guidelines we've been using, then we've accomplished nothing by these guidelines. So I feel that we need to get someone to work on these who knows what they're doing. What a great job these two have done, but it's now time to get an expert.
Well,
Anybody else have anything?
I thought that's what we were gonna do tonight, was to go over what we've got, and in the process of doing that, a lot would surface that might, at the end of the day, come to what you're talking about, but if you cut it off prematurely, then we're shut down at the gate, so that'd be my, I mean, I think we need to spend a lot of time talking about this tonight.
I would suggest if we do that, we go page by page, item by item.
Yes, but isn't that what the agenda says to do? To review it?
It doesn't really specifically say that.
Well, I think that's the intent, is to do that. So, and we need to have a discussion on this, so that's what we need. All right. All right, so we have a new planner here, so I'm gonna,
If I
But-
can, we still need you to accept the agenda.
that's right.
I'll
So,
make a motion that we accept the consent agenda.
Second?
all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right. Okay, we have the minutes. Any comments, corrections, discussion on the approval of the minutes for March 2nd, 2021, April 6th, 2021?
Just one, on the April 6 minutes, there were a couple of places where it said there were comments, but I think it meant there were no comments. I think the word no was left out, and on page 2 of the April 6 meetings, minutes. Okay.
You get that?
Okay, I'll make a motion that we accept the 2 meeting agendas with the change that Mike Strube had offered.
Do I have a second?
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Unfinished business. Application for proposed text amendments to the Cape Charles zoning ordinance from Town Council. Article 2 definitions, Article 8 historic district overlay. All right, so who's going, is this the town planner or the zoning administrator that's going to walk us through this?
And it includes the philosophy, does it, too?
Yes.
Yes. So yes, just to clarify, Kate, did you say you had done a staff report on this, or? Okay, if you would present the staff report.
So in your packet, you have received a staff report outlining the major themes or items that are being proposed for change in your historic district overlay. Administratively, the definition section, we are proposing to put all definitions under Article 2 of the zoning ordinance instead of in different sections. So that is one of the biggest changes you'll see. And we're also looking to clarify some of the definitional terms that are in this document as well as they apply to the historic district overlay. Within the historic district, there is a philosophy document that was generated from our joint meeting with the Historic District Board, Planning Commission, and Town Council. We've enclosed that as well for your discussion this evening as a context document to lay the foundation to the proposed changes to the zoning ordinance. Within the ordinance itself, there is proposed a new section dealing with the demolition of a structure and what that process would be. And then there are other administrative changes elsewhere in the document dealing with minor alterations, substantial alterations, and the administration of each respectively. We would like to go through page by page, section by section, to take up what might be our conversations and comments and any proposed changes to the document. We do not actually have to take a vote this evening. That, I think, was the intent. We were trying to see if we can get to a recommendation this evening. But if there is enough comment or discussion this evening that we feel we are not prepared to move this along to Town Council, that would be whatever position you wish to take at the end of our discussion this evening. So I think that gives you the broad overviews, and both Ben and myself are prepared to help along the way through any of this. Okay?
Thank you.
Thanks.
Has this gone to the Historic District Review Board at all?
It has been forwarded to all the members of the Historic District Review Board.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, so just for a point of clarification here, we have a member on the planning commission that is on the Historic District Review Board, and it's Mike Strube. We have a prior member that was on the Historic District Review Board, and that's Diane D'Amico, all right? And then, of course, we have Paul Grossman, who's on everything. All right, so. I guess the first thing would be the guiding
Yes.
philosophy. So, this is open for discussion.
Okay, you want to go section by section or person by person in terms of comments?
Well, let's go by if you have comments, in general, you have comments on this guiding philosophy, go ahead,
Okay.
start it.
Okay. I'd like to begin by commenting very favorably on the final paragraph in the guiding philosophy page that we have here. I thought it was excellent. I wouldn't change a word. So now let's go back to the top in the first paragraph, and there's a point or two probably in each of the other paragraphs that I'd like to address. In the first paragraph, there is a phrase in there about the second sentence, without taking a strict preservationist approach. Okay, to me that sounded a little bit vague, and I know that the philosophy of the board has been to consider the exterior appearance of the dwelling. You know, what people do inside their homes is not anything that the board can consider. So if that were to be reworded by focusing on the exterior approach, by focusing on the exterior appearance, I think that would call attention to how we and strict preservation separate, because like in Williamsburg, it's inside and out and that sort of thing, but we're strictly exterior. So that would be my comment from the first paragraph. In the second paragraph, it mentions balancing the welfare of the general public with the interests of individual property owners. And I frankly have no idea what the balance is. It's as if they're in opposition, that the welfare of the general public is different from the interest of the individual property owners, or you wouldn't use the word balance. So it's not clear what that means. And in the next paragraph, the last sentence says both Article 8 and the design guidelines are approved by the town council. Well, that, of course, I mean, that's always the case. I don't know why that needs to be called out specifically in there. They always, there's nothing new in that I know of.
Well, Mike, it is new because we had just recently amended Article 8 to include town council review of design guidelines. So it hadn't always been that way. It's been recently adopted.
I think by definition, town council can review them, has that authority, but.
No,
okay.
not in this particular case, as Article 8 was previously written.
Okay, good. Yeah, that's fine, just pointing these out. Let's see. Then in the next paragraph, it talks about using the board using judgment discretion when referring to the design guidelines. I think the whole process here is about interpreting the guidelines, and that the board has considerable freedom to do that. That's always been the case. It's on page 8 of the current design guidelines. So by saying interpreting the guidelines at that point, I think that that's a better way to say it. Again, these are my comments. Then there's the last sentence. If the board determines that due to unique circumstances, a request should be granted outside the design guidelines, they may do so, but will document their rationale. Well, I think the design guidelines, and it says they're not laws or rules and everything, but they can be interpreted to include most anything. And so I can't imagine anything else that could be totally outside the guidelines that would require some kind of separate approval. So if there are many examples of that, then that's fine, but the guidelines are not that specific, and I think they cover most everything. So that would be my comment there. And then in the next paragraph, standards are different from guidelines, of course. The standards are requirements, and I think I read mandated by ordinance that will not be considered by the board. That's what the board does. It interprets the standards through the guidelines. I mean, the guidelines present from the standards. And so it's just to help to follow the standards by using the guidelines. So I would reword it to say the standards or requirements mandated by ordinance and must be followed by the Historic District Review Board.
Okay, Mike, can I respond to that one?
Sure. Well, if you want to go, yeah, sure.
Well, I'm just in particular on that. If you look at where we're going in Article 8, we're separating the authority over standards versus guidelines between the zoning administrator and the board. So we're saying a standard 6-foot fence painted white installed in a certain fashion, if it became such a standard, that will fall into the realm of the zoning administrator, and that the board will not review that. That's the intent of what we're saying in this particular paragraph.
Okay, I mean, I hear what you're saying, interpreting that way, but...
Well, Article 8 has those words, and we'll get there when
Okay.
you see that section.
Are standards the requirements in the zoning ordinance
I mean,
for setbacks and height and?
Correct. That's what would be good examples of standards. And a good example is, and the board has gone through this with regards to insect screening on porches. There isn't anything in the design guidelines, but the ordinance has a standard that tells you one way or the other as to how to install it. That's a standard that would be controlled by the zoning administrator.
well, to me, go ahead,
I'm confused
Diane.
as to why we then bother to put standards in this. I feel like we're muddying the water by talking about standards and guidelines when we need to, the definition of standards is requirements that are evaluated by the zoning administrator or code official. That's not a definition.
My impression was this is a broad overview of where everything else will flow from.
Correct.
So that
Which
by
is
understanding
this new section 8, is that, or are you talking about the guiding philosophy?
this section that we're doing right now, the guiding philosophy,
Okay.
kind of sets up how we view the rest of the articles. So I don't think this was meant as a standalone document that this part
No.
that covers everything. It just gives us an overview. I think that was the intent here. So we shouldn't look for all of those details in these couple of paragraphs. We'll see those things as we get to Article 8 and to other articles that may eventually be modified.
Is this guiding philosophy for us and say for the town council?
Yes.
It's not for the public?
Well,
Go ahead.
Chairman, if I can,
Well, it is.
first of all, I'm here as a resource. Ask me any questions. I'm the author of this document, so I can help explain what I was trying to do with it. And the comments that Ken's making is exactly right. This is this flows from that. So based on the work session we all had, this was the takeaway from, not everybody agreed with it, but the majority of the folks at that work session consolidated around this philosophy. This philosophy was then sent back out to everybody as written, and the majority of the folks, again, agreed, yes, this is what we had consensus on at the work session. So based on that, we fine-tuned Article 8 to accomplish this philosophy. Yes, this philosophy just gives an overview summary of the rationale behind why we're rewriting Article 8, and we will be rewriting the design guidelines. Remember, the next step in this process is this was step 1, is to do the initial changes to Article 8 and Article 2. We had an RFP on the street for the past month. They just finished. We just got those proposals in on Friday. I haven't even had a chance to read them yet. To hire a contractor with the expertise that I mentioned to help us review this article again and to rewrite the design guidelines consistent with it. That will then go through this whole process for approval. Then it's assumed that after we go through all that, this may need a tweak one last time based on all that additional work. So it's kind of a 3-step process to get where we need to go on this. And again, it comes down to why are we doing this? And that's the quintessential question here. And why are we doing this? Because the council has a different philosophy than the board up until now. That's why we're doing this. So this represents the philosophy of the council, and it also represents the philosophy of the majority of the people who participated in that work session, which is the council, the commission, and the board. So not everyone's going to agree with this, but that's the consensus position. So this should not be taken. Going through it word by word, trying to define it like a piece of legislation is not really appropriate. This is an overview philosophy. That kind of worrying about wordsmithing each little word, that's Article 8. That's where it matters. I almost would recommend you start there and then go back to this.
Okay, thank you. But you mentioned that this was sent out to everybody for review. I personally didn't get it. I think there's some other.
There was no vote.
I didn't get any. Did anybody here get it? I got it?
Yeah, because I responded to them.
Okay, I never got it.
I sent it out 2 days after the work session to everybody who
When you
attended.
said
But,
there
I
was a
mean-
vote on it, there was no vote on
I said it was consensus. We went
it. You
around.
said vote specifically.
You said vote.
I stand corrected. There was no vote. There was consensus of everybody around the table. There was consensus from everybody who responded to the email.
This was one complimentary meeting that we had between council, planning commission, and historic review board. By no standard should that be taken as the final answer. I mean, come on, that was a sit around table and discuss your philosophy. You're the one who made up the philosophy.
No, I did not.
Yes, you sent this out one day after the meeting. It was premeditated.
It was not.
Okay.
Actually, I was at the meeting. It was not that at all, Ed.
So,
That was a joint session.
It was a joint session.
That was a
but I
joint,
didn't think that
let me,
there
let
was
me,
gonna be
we're gonna move on.
that was a work session of which there was collaboration amongst all 3 bodies to come up with these things and these ideas.
Town manager ran that meeting, and he ran it the way he wanted to run.
In your opinion.
There was no
Okay.
vote on anything that night, and I take that.
Yeah.
Billed as a work session, but it wasn't.
It's a work
it
session,
wasn't
and a work
conducted-
session,
It
you
wasn't
can't take a
conducted
vote.
as a work session, because we never have
Okay,
gone through it like we're doing now.
took
but
that
anyway.
back, all right?
But I just want to say, I think Katie and Ben, they're working to make sure the standards are followed, as are we, and when they get situations that it's somewhat ambiguous, that requires a little more expertise and all, they say to the applicant, okay, this is going to have to go before the board to get their take on it, and it's all kind of working together. It's not like Katie and Ben do the standards and we do guidelines, that sort of thing. I think it's all the same process.
If I may, Mr. Chairman, and the members of the board, in zoning, the town council has the right to advance zoning amendments. I don't want anyone to lose sight of that. So does the planning commission has the right to advance zoning amendments. And that is what we are here to discuss today, is we have received a zoning amendment proposal from the town council. It may not represent a particular appointed board's point of view, and clearly we did hear that outlined and indicated from our town manager that there clearly is a difference of philosophy as to the administration and oversight of what a historic district overlay is. Council has the right to propose those amendments. It's up to this body at this point to review them, determine if those amendments are acceptable, do they require revisions, or what is your recommendation to do at this point, and advance that back to the town council for further action from them. There are going to be differing viewpoints, but council has the right to put this document forward. Okay?
Thank you.
Sure.
Okay, let's move on. We're gonna go to, it just seems that we need to go to Article 8. All right, so that's right underneath the overview. So, open for discussion. Start at the top.
Will it assist you, Mr. Chairman, if I go through each section? Will
Sure,
help
that would help.
the discussion?
Thank you.
Can you hear me, Libby, if I stay here?
I'm gonna get the microphone and bring it to you.
Okay, thank you. So on page 1, the first opening paragraphs, the first 3 have not changed from what was in our existing current ordinance. Moving on to 8.1, we are proposing changes here, so I open it up if there are any comments from the members of the Planning Commission on 8.1. Seeing or hearing none?
Yeah. Looks fine to me.
I'll give you a second, Diane.
What was the reason for taking out provide for protection and use guard instead?
Clarity? Clarity?
Well, you could explain that.
So,
Guard says everything that phrase says. It just simplifies it, makes it clearer. Go ahead, sir.
Go ahead.
Well,
so if I could address it, again, getting back to the philosophical approach, is to move away from the strict preservationist approach, which has a formal definition. Preservationist has formal meaning, right? And the philosophy that the council wanted to bring forward was to bring away from that. And so to lighten up on the language, not to provide for the protection, but to guard against, meaning it's less strong. That was the reason.
Any other discussion on that first paragraph? 8.1?
Okay, moving on to 8.2, there are no proposed changes to that from our current ordinance. 8.3 is where we do have the next round of changes being proposed of the inventory of landmarks and contributing properties established.
Just 8.3 is about inventory maps. I think the first time, in the first sentence, for the first time it's used, you ought to leave the word inventory map in there, just so it's very clear that's what you're talking about. And then if you want to remove it in the rest of the paragraph, okay, but, and then
Well,
towards
Mike,
the
let me back up. The reason inventory came out is we do not have a map that shows, we have a map that shows the boundary.
you don't have the inventory map.
We don't have an inventory map, and we cannot find an inventory map, so that was one of the reasons we took a different approach in this section to clearly distinguish what homes are going to be included and what aren't.
But it doesn't say there's no inventory map, does it?
Well, we struck out, and that's why I'm saying we struck out the word inventory.
Yeah, I know the word, but
I thought the inventory map was
the list of the,
contributing and non-contributing?
I thought that was a list of the,
No,
okay.
it's not a list. Okay, let's back up. When going back into history, we could not find the documentation that would support this paragraph, 8.3. So in lieu of that, we said, fine, we have a listing, and let's utilize the National Register as a listing for our basis.
Right.
And that's how the wording in here moved away from the map aspect to the actual inventory listing. We do need a map, official map, zoning map that shows the historic district. The only one we have now is in the design guidelines. I could not find any records other than that particular map, and that has to be brought forward and put on a zoning map.
And you
So-
should be
Okay, I
part
mean,
of
well-
this,
So
right?
Paul, where
Well,
you,
this is driving a map. We need to have a map that's accompanying.
And that is part of this pack too.
at the end of that first underlined additional part where you say, as identified in the National Register, structures or sites, so that's the list.
Correct.
So we're removing inventory from in front of map because
Right.
there is no inventory map.
Right.
But there is a list, and by adding that, that resolves that conflict.
That's right.
That's right.
And the fact that the map had to stay, the word map has to stay because a zoning map needs to reflect what our district boundaries
Yeah,
are
okay.
officially.
I didn't know there was no inventory map. Oh, okay.
Yeah, well, we didn't either until I started digging into
Okay,
this.
I mean,
Go ahead.
When I went to the National Register, how come I came up with a map that had little C's and N's on it?
That's the National Register map. That is not the town accepted map. That map is different. Our map envelopes the National Register map. Just for instance, the National Register, when you go down the boundary line, for instance, Jefferson, it zigzags. It doesn't include Washington. Our district overlay map includes Washington Avenue, as an example. So it doesn't have to match the National Register, it does not have to. We can make it match, but it doesn't have to match the National Register. And in the past, the town has elected to envelope it. And that's what we need drawn officially and have it very visible for us. Right now, it only resides in the design guidelines.
That'll be part of the scope of work the consultant will be working on.
Right.
So you are thinking we should pass this without this map, and then this map will come later?
I have it already. We're operating as a historic board without this map.
I know, and this is one of our problems, is it not?
No, because I can use the design guide map and say, oh, this applicant falls within that boundary, bring it to the board. We need to move that map and agree to it in zoning space. It may have been done years ago, we could not locate it.
okay.
Then why don't we change this just to not mention this map? And then when we get the map, and as you say, when this person does all this changing and fixing, then they can fix
Well,
that.
if I remove the map from here, then nothing drives the zoning map change.
Then there would be no property in the overlay district. You have to define the parameters of the
Right.
overlay district,
Right.
yes. Because it is a zoning layer.
So, but you're saying you can define the parameters, but you don't have any map that shows you what the parameters actually are?
Boundaries,
we can-
boundaries.
Not the boundaries.
You know what the, so what, okay.
Good.
Go
Are
ahead.
we using two different words, boundaries and parameters here? So boundaries is
Yeah, all right.
outline,
Right.
and parameters is,
I don't know.
The distinction is, there's a map and there's an inventory.
Right.
We don't have an inventory, we do have a map. We need to keep the map.
Okay.
We just don't want to call it an inventory map because that's an incorrect description.
Right.
well, that's why I'm saying we don't put any of that in there at all. Why don't we just say we have a map with boundaries and everything in that map?
That's what
That's what it says.
By
That's what it
accepting this, that's exactly what happens.
It says a map covering the areas as set forth, et cetera, et cetera. So it goes further on to describe that. We also then reference that there is a list done by the National Register of Structures. And we want to include that reference because that is relevant to how we're also evaluating within the guidelines between contributory and non-contributory structures. So the reference to that document shows people where we're finding that information and how they can find that information. So that's relevant to have in here. Both parts are relevant here. Yes, as proposed and written.
Okay. We're gonna put the map in that we've been discussing.
Yes.
Map which shows boundaries. Okay. Okay, and what did we decide 1964? We picked that
Yes.
as the date?
Yes.
And so that'll be included also?
That's the purpose,
In the
that's the
list.
exact purpose of this section, is to
Right.
establish that.
Okay. All right, move on.
Okay, so sections 8.4 running through 8.8 had no proposed changes. Moving down to 8.9, for the historic board members' qualifications, we are looking to add, when possible, there be a licensed architect or engineer, planning commission member, or licensed building contractor.
Now, this is only to be in agreement with the historic board bylaws. There's a set of bylaws. So that was
This is
the,
what the bylaw says?
a lot of this section is mimicking the bylaws. Now, why we have bylaws, we can discuss at a different time, but it tells you you can have a meeting every Tuesday, second Tuesday of every month, or whatever, in the bylaws. As far as qualifications, this is exactly the same wording as in the bylaws, and we just made it consistent.
Maybe it should be housed here and not in the bylaws.
We can come back to the bylaws and just say, what is it doing for us?
Yeah,
I
right.
haven't figured that out.
Got it.
Any further discussion on 8.9?
This, 8.11, oh, no, I'm sorry. I was gonna go to 8.11.
There's no changes to 8.11.
But I do have a question. They're meeting more than once a month now, are you not?
We have a regular session, which is the third Tuesday of every month. And again, we are convening special meetings as needed.
Much like we do.
Yes.
Yeah. Not in the past year. Okay, so,
Sore point?
any, Katie, go ahead, continue.
Sure. Then we move down to 8.12, there are no proposed changes, so jumping into 8.13, procedures. So we have some additions to this section of the ordinance.
And John, I'd ask you to,
Yeah, if I could explain that one?
Yeah.
So, what this is to do is to make sure there's cooperation between the board and administration in administrative support. As currently written, the board could decide to, conduct meetings every other day or whatever. Anytime the board does something that requires staff support, I need to make sure that I have this capacity to meet the needs of the board. So that's why it says, with concurrence of the town manager, you can set your policy. And if for some reason the town manager is unreasonable, you have the option of going over my head to the council.
Yeah,
Well,
sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Oh, the planning and zoning staff, we ourselves reviewed some of these things, and so we have questions in some of the later sections, but this one in particular is, if the board does decide to appeal to the town council, who, I was gonna say, who kind of spearheads that? Because if it's staff itself, that means we are forwarding appeal against our own town manager, and there's a little bit of conflict there. So one recommendation that we staff had discussed was the staff itself could prepare a procedural manual for the board itself. But as the town manager just said, the whole purpose of this was to work together with the board and I guess the town manager. So there's some working together. It could be that, I guess, staff could work with the board directly then to create this manual, but in the but to kind of summarize, it is concerning, at least to my department, that if we have to appeal on behalf of the board against our own town manager, that is a bit of a awkward situation for us.
Okay, but the way I read this is that the board can directly go to town council in this case.
Okay, but
Staff is not required to be involved.
okay, so in that case, is it my understanding then that if they make appeals, they will get no staff support?
They don't need staff support, they can send something right to the mayor.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think that's the whole point, that, these boards serve the town council, and if a decision is rendered by the board, the town council can do what it can, totally overturn, reject it, whatever. But once the staff introduces this to the board, then it's up to the board and the town council to take it from there. So to have a board decision be compromised by a staff requirement for staff concurrence doesn't make any sense.
Right.
And just note, in the second line there, all meetings need to have a space between the two. I guess it's been there forever.
Okay, no other questions on that section, we're fine to proceed.
Did you get
14.
your question on 811 resolved?
On 14, there are a couple of just grammatical tweaks started at the beginning. So I will work our way through that. On A, I think those are minor grammatical changes. C, we are looking to substitute conduct to change that to oversee studies. Under E, there are a few word changes being proposed there. No comments?
Well, I'll just mention, Mike, on E, this is where now this is in agreement with the balance of Article 8, because before you could adopt standard guidelines as a board.
Okay.
All right, that through the last amendment to Article 8, we now require a recommendation coming from the board and ultimately town council involvement.
Okay.
All right?
Yeah, standard in black and white things that, don't require anything further, that's one thing, but, I think it's just the way how it's envisioned that guidelines prescind from standards as one way of understanding and interpretation of standards, but that could be separate, I guess. I don't know operationally if that'll work, but I hear what you're saying.
And what would be an example of a standard that they might recommend, since that is totally under the review or the purview of them?
Well, let's say in the design guidelines,
Yeah,
a revised,
standards.
okay, in a revised set of guidelines, it may become an opportunity for something that's very repetitive, and the board saying, this is so straightforward, I'm gonna delegate it to my zoning administrator, move it into section 3.3 or whatever, R1 district is, and have it become a standard there, and then the board can opt out. So that's the difference where I see.
Okay.
Okay. Moving down to G, there's a proposal to remove a few words and add the character of historic landmarks, etc.
So, when you say preserve the character, does this go back to the, if I'm standing in the public right of way and I look at the building and I'm an ordinary person and I don't see any difference, that's good? That's preserving character?
I can't say that I can answer that question. I would probably look to Paul or to John to see if you might have.
The point of this paragraph is to go back to, again, that philosophy point that the council wanted to make, is to move away from the strict preservationist approach, which is to restore and conserve, and to just preserve the character. The whole point of that work session was to say, what's important to the town? And what's important to the town is to preserve the character of the historic quality, not necessarily the museum quality, but the character of it. And so that's all this is doing here. It's just staying consistent with that philosophy. So we're just tightening up words as we go through here to reflect that philosophy.
And then too, I think there's, with the word work sessions, we've always in the past saw work sessions as line by line. We're here for hours, you know, and it sounds like we're being very specific and almost nitpicky, but we want to make sure that every single word is right, and we've been through that before in the past, and so that's what a work session means to many of us here.
Give me a couple seconds. When you say restore, because we had that discussion about preserve, but when you say restore, are we using restoration, or are we using restore as we might find it in the dictionary?
We're striking it, so we're not using it at all.
Yes, you are.
Where?
G.
Gee.
I guess I'm concerned, I don't want to feel like the historic district has to be all preservation. But I feel the general feeling of this, or the general push for this, is that really we're not the least bit interested in preservation as long as we have the look. And that concerns me.
That is exactly the point. That is exactly, you hit it right on the head. That's the differing philosophy between the council and the board right now.
Well, but preservation is a choice made by a homeowner. They can preserve or not, right? In the historic district, am I right?
Right now, they don't have a choice. Right now, but the way it's written,
That's not true.
it's
That's not
geared more toward.
That is absolutely not true. We've had one appeal in over 100 applicants in the past year. One.
But
The homeowners are happy. I don't know who you're talking to that's complaining, but we don't hear it. I don't see this big divide. I don't know what the motivation is behind it.
Let's continue.
Okay.
Okay. Moving down into section 8.15. So again, there are substantial changes in here as we are trying to segregate out between what is under the zoning administrator's purview and what is under the historic district review board's purview. And so again, we're trying to make sure that the standards that clearly are zoning requirements fall under the zoning administrator, and then those that are guidelines fall under the historic district review board.
If I was a citizen with no knowledge of any of this, but I wanted to see who I needed to go see, I would have no idea what standards is, and I would have maybe a little more idea of what guidelines are. Is there any way we can be more specific about what they are or lead them in the direction to find it elsewhere?
Standards would be in the ordinance, guidelines would be in the guidelines.
Okay, let's go out on the street and ask people. I'll bet you none of them know what you're talking about. That's what I'm trying to say. Make it a little clearer for the person on the street.
Well, I was gonna say in that regards, would it be helpful to when the distinction is first made between standards and guidelines, to put perhaps some sort of asterisk stating or a footnote at the bottom saying, for definitions of standards and guidelines, see section, I forget which section, it contains the definitions, but use as a reference, as you're saying, just, if you want to know the difference, go to this, section, this subsection, to see for what the definitions are.
And we'll guide them when they come in. If someone's gonna come in for a building permit, we're gonna tell them, what you wanna do is, can be handled here, or no, this is gotta go to the board. I mean, we can assist them with that.
Well, to me, as I read, I flip back and forth to definitions so that I know what I'm reading. I'm not assuming anything. And so if I say actions related to standards, and I think, well, what standards? And I flip back to definitions, it just says requirements that are evaluated by the zoning administrator, ... So that doesn't tell me what standards are. Now, very nice that I could go to the town and ask, but even you said we've got a problem with staffing. And so the more we can get people to understand what they're reading without having to go to staff or going to staff with some knowledge that they can say, well, I understand what standards are, but.
And maybe it may be as simple as clarifying that definition. Standards are zoning ordinance requirements.
Absolutely.
Oh, that's good.
I think that's exactly what we want to say.
But, yeah, because you don't want, I don't think,
Thank
people to get the impression that guidelines have nothing to do with standards, but you're almost getting that from what we're reading in here.
So I think if we
My
just-
gosh, that's what all it is. It's all about the standard, but at a higher level of detail.
Right, so we make it very clear, the zoning ordinance is what we mean by standards.
Okay.
Yes.
I think if it's in the definition, that is absolutely
Yes.
perfect. Do we need to go back and look at design guidelines and be a little more specific about? Are those guidelines and recommendations of
The definition of design guidelines are those set of guidelines and recommendations adopted pursuant to section 8.20 and 9.20 of this code.
Excuse me, you can't use the word in its definition.
Hang on. Guidelines are, it's further defined,
Good.
guidelines are parameters which the Historic District Review Board will consult when making decisions.
Thank you.
I know, they actually defined it further.
Well, if there are design guidelines for the Historic District Review Board, you don't have to put their parameters. I mean, these are the guidelines. Well, so you still haven't said what the guidelines are. What's 820? I looked at that earlier. Yeah, well, an 820 doesn't give you much more information. So if we are using currently our design guidelines, the interior department, then I think we need to specify that.
So your guidelines are a document that are adopted by the town as the guidelines for the Historic District Review Board.
Okay,
And it has a date when it gets adopted, and that is what we follow to the most recent set of guidelines that a community may adopt.
and where is that?
What do you mean, where is that?
Well, I'm asking you, what are the design guidelines that have
We've
recently
defined
been
how that
adopted?
process happens, and so we can look under the ordinance section, and so it goes to town council, and as soon as they adopt it, we publicize that on the website, that this is the effective design guidelines in effect for this community, and we make that available to everyone. It's up on our website today.
Is it specifically the Department of the Interior and no changes?
It's not Department of the Interior, it's the town of Cape Charles. It's your design guidelines that you have adopted, that the town has adopted.
Wow, really? you all know that?
No, I didn't know the distinction between town and national.
No, I don't think so either.
So you are using the booklet,
This,
Yes.
the
This-
interior department booklet, and the town has.
No.
No? Okay.
It's the town.
this, it's called the Cape Charles Historic Document Guidelines, Historic District Guidelines.
Uh-huh.
And it shows on the acknowledgements page that it was adopted December 2001 and revised October 2017.
And the interior department, criteria, a lot of it is embedded in there.
Right,
Yeah.
yes,
But
right,
but
right,
it's not one for one.
right,
Right.
right.
So this has been specifically developed for the town and they adopted it.
The infrastructure comes from interior, but the customization is for the town.
Right.
Yep.
It may have been the supporting material to help us
Right.
craft this,
Exactly,
Yes.
exactly.
yes.
Can we put the specific name of that in here?
Well, I can't presume it's always gonna get named that. It's what,
If
it's,
it changes, you change this.
well, changing
What
an
are you
ordinance
pointing
is, as you can see, a little
Design
challenging.
guidelines.
So,
Are those set of guidelines? What's the?
these are called the Cape Charles Historic
So-
District Guidelines.
Yeah.
That's
Okay,
what they're called.
okay.
Well, here's maybe a middle ground. Can you provide the URL of the page on the town website that those reside?
Well,
I'm
I
just-
don't know, we're gonna send this over to Munico when we're all done. Can you do that?
Links change, I wouldn't
Yeah.
recommend doing that.
Yeah, yeah, probably not.
Okay, just a thought.
But it's on the historic site and it's also one of the forms and publications.
Okay.
So one other question, wasn't sure if we're done with that particular subject just yet. But again, staffing had a concern with subsection A. Actions related to standards will be exclusively the purview of the zoning or code official. The question that we had is specifically of, who designates, which standards that the,
Which official?
yeah, which official, I should say, thank you, has exclusive purview of which standards. It is kind of the concern at this moment that if the board didn't like the outcome that they get from the zoning administrator, they may go to the code official instead. Or
Well,
vice
you get
versa.
no from mom, go to dad.
So there was just we just asked that there is greater clarification for that. There was a suggested language of keeping the first part, which is actions related to standards will be exclusively the purview of the zoning administrator. If the administrator is not available, town council may appoint the code official or another to administrate the standards. That way, the first stop comes to the zoning administrator for these standards. But if they're not available, then it can go to the code official or whoever the town council appoints.
Or more if the zoning administrator position is
Vacant.
that there is a backup, a backstop to fill that responsibility within the
Right.
town administration.
So the intent of this would not be that onerous. The intent is that within the existing code right now, certain areas of responsibility are already fall under the responsibility of the zoning administrator, other areas fall under the code official. They stay the same. That's all. It should a standard be developed that would fall somewhere in the code that would be normally under the purview of the building official, they would take care of it. If it falls under the zoning administrator, they would take care of it. And if there's any ambiguity, that's my job to figure that out. I wouldn't want to put something in here that's going to have to send something through the process of the town council just so we can get a ruling on something. I think that's micromanaging the code.
You don't think now that we have a planner, that it would go zoning administrator planner before code
Well,
official?
the code's already written in a certain way that gives the code official certain authority to do things, or gives the zoning official authority to do things. Very frequently, if anywhere, I'm not sure there's a place where the town planner has that authority.
Yeah.
So,
Well,
And I'm gonna disagree just a smidge here, John. The code official actually doesn't have zoning administration powers. That's all.
Correct,
But the way this reads seems that he could, because what the zoning administrator would be administering is zoning code requirements. Or maybe the code official will do it.
No, there's certain things in Article 8 that does call out for code official, relative to inspections, I think. So, or emergency temporary repairs, or.
For demolition or
Correct.
dangerous
There are
structures.
certain things in Article 8 that is specifically called out that fall under purview of code official and not the zoning administrator.
So could we add as defined in Article 8?
No, it's defined in all your zoning, and you got your building codes, there's more than just zoning.
Well, building code is
Building
different.
codes are all dealt with under the code official.
If I may interrupt, based off of our discussions previously here, we have said that the standards were the zoning ordinance. So in that case, we would either need to expand the definition of the standards from what's in the zoning ordinance and in the building code, or say standards and building code.
No, because building code is state law. It's not a local law. It's the building code. And same thing with dangerous structures. That's a state law that you guys have accepted a local ordinance from, or municipal code, I should call that, sorry. So there's a difference between zoning code and other town codes you have adopted. And the building official is governed through his building official codes. There's a whole section just for the building official, including dangerous structures or demolition of structures, that's governed through state law. So that's where I came to a little, just trying to make sure I understood down the road, if the position of zoning administrator was vacant, does that mean the code official takes over those responsibilities? That's all I was trying to get clarity
No.
on, because that's how this reads to me.
I see where you're coming from that, and yet, now, that cannot be contempt, because
Okay.
the council is required to appoint
Right.
the zoning official.
Right.
So this, you couldn't just state it in here and have it override that.
Well, let
Okay.
me ask you, is there any problem with just striking out or code official in this particular case?
Not in this particular case, no.
Then I'd offer then to amend the wording there, just to leave it at zoning administrator, period.
That's fine.
Okay.
It was just a very broad, we go through the whole ordinance trying to make it as broad as possible, and in this case, you probably don't need it, not in this spot.
No, and I'm just saying, I don't think you do need it, because the building official has huge discretion under state code.
Okay.
That trumps
So-
this all over. Yeah.
Yeah. I
Okay.
have a problem striking those last three words from my sentence.
Okay. Any other comments on A or B at this point?
Is that just to be clear, we're going through this, is that the will of the commission?
Yeah, I'll make a motion that we strike or code official in section 8.15A.
Second.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. Further discussion?
Is that correct procedure within our discussion?
Yes.
Who's second?
Yeah.
Exactly.
It doesn't mean you've accepted the whole thing, we're just
Just that
making little
part.
tweaks along the way.
You're only doing
Yes.
this one little thing.
Yes,
Okay.
So just to make sure, the motion was to strike or code official.
That's
yes.
correct.
Okay.
Okay. Moving
Any
down.
further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Thank you.
Okay, in section 8.16, certain minor actions exempted from Historic District Review Board. There are some proposed additions and changes here. Starting in section E. And I know staff has some comments that we would like to, and I think we're just looking for some clarity in some of this conversation here as well.
I just noted typo there, trash receptacle.
Yes, I caught that, yes. And,
That was not our question. What's a track? No, that wasn't it.
So, Yeah, I was gonna say if there was no other comments about E. Okay. Yes, there was some staff wants or wishes for some clarity on subsection H, which reads, additions or deletions to an existing building which are not visible from the public right of way and which will not significantly alter the character of the building. Alleys in this context are not considered public places. We are looking for clarification to make sure that the use of the phrase right of way is using the same definition as found in section 2.9, which means one, a strip of land acquired by reservation, dedication, dedication, prescribed or condemned, and intended to be occupied by a road, crosswalk, railroad, electric transmission line, oil or gas pipelines, water lines, sanitation, sanitary, storm, sewer, and other similar uses. And two, generally the right of one to pass over the property of another. So there have been questions in the past about what is basically the a right of way by some residents, and so in particular with this, I guess it's just is there a more clarified way that we could say define either right of way or sorry, let me rephrase that. Is the right of way here used the same as what's in the definitions, or is it intended to?
No. When you talk railroads and things like that is not. So one alternative to this is not visible from a public street.
Public street, okay. Street or sidewalk, okay.
And the definition of street is the actual blacktop part of the street,
Right,
not the
right.
sidewalk or any of that.
Any reason why that last sentence it says considered public places rather than public right-of-ways? I mean, you've been talking about right-of-ways, it just seems like it would end with not be considered public right-of-ways.
Sorry, which?
H.
In H. Alleys are, in this context, are not considered public places.
I think if I could just interject, because some of the alleys have been accepted as public alleys, some are still private alleys. So I think that's why we're trying to have a little bit of distinction and
Okay.
not, we need to clarify between those two types of alleys we have in the community.
So if I could ask a question in general about this section.
Yes.
Does the official who's reviewing, zoning administrator, as they go through these things, make the decision of, I feel this is within my purview, I don't need any more clarification, I understand what you, homeowner, are trying to do, and I can make that decision? Or, I'm not exactly sure this falls under what you mean, or how it fits with our standards, I guess, or even guidelines, and no, I'm going to refer it on to the board to make a decision. So that's sort of like the first, do I understand it enough that I can make a decision, or no, I need to immediately
Yes.
pass this on?
Yes, that is part of what the person in this job does, is they look at every application that comes in and says, okay, is this something I can handle administratively? Is this truly a minor repair or alteration occurring, and does it fall under my purview? And if it does, then I issue my decision and they go on their merry way. If I feel it does not, or there's some ambiguity in it, I would issue a written decision to them saying, I do not feel it's under my authority, you need to go to the Historic District Review Board. Everyone has the right to appeal a decision of the zoning administrator, and there are appeals process for doing that. Or they could accept the decision and say, okay, I move over to the Historic District Review Board if you say you can't do it. Yes.
And the opening paragraph to this whole section indicates, following any similar actions which in the opinion of the zoning administrator. So yes, they'll take the first stab at this.
And I guess that
Yes.
brings me to the thought of maybe there are more things, because the board has a lot of work to do. And the more, not that you don't, I'm sorry, I didn't mean it to come out that way. But the more that can be handled at the administrative level, it speeds things up for homeowners, by months. And so there may be other things we may want to consider putting here, that it would be reasonable for the zoning administrator to look at that. If it doesn't follow what our standards are, then it goes to the board.
And I think in that vein, Ken, I'm gonna jump the gun here, Ben, I apologize. We don't think that there's sufficient direction that's been given for all fencing under this.
For what?
All fencing being requested. The way I've read through this article, we've got, say, under section E here, fencing immediately surrounding trash receptacles or your AC units.
That's
And that's,
specifically limiting to just fencing in that particular application.
right, and so I wasn't clear that all the fencing for the backyard that people are seeking is considered a minor.
No, it's not listed here.
It looks like it still
That's
reads
correct.
as requiring the Historic District Review
Until
Board.
deemed made a standard, if it does make a standard, it gets then put into your zoning ordinance.
And I think in conversations I've had with you and members of the Historic District Review Board, we do feel if they are in compliance with the zoning standards of height, location, materials, does that really require that it should go to the Historic District Review Board? So from a staff perspective, I guess I'm one who's petitioning, could there be a little more latitude written in here?
Well, if you feel that fence is adequately defined in your zoning ordinance, that the historic board agrees to, we can insert fence in here as well.
Okay, that was my fencing, actually.
Right,
I just went through that.
fencing is the biggest one I've heard from many homeowners, and I do have members of my board here. I hope I'm not speaking out of turn in saying that they would agree with that sort of arrangement being more an administrative review for the fencing, possibly even for some of the sheds that are located in the back. Whether that the size of the shed may be a determining factor as to what goes to the Historic District Review Board or not. I think sheds would be another one, and I shouldn't call them sheds, accessory structures.
Yeah.
Because that's how we define them in our ordinance. So that's from a staff perspective, those would be two that we have heard again and again, people would like some relief from that requirement.
Stealing my questions.
Okay,
told
so let's just take one at a time though. Fence, okay? Are you satisfied that the zoning administrator can handle all fences and that the historic board agrees that you can do that?
We were going by what the zoning administrator showed us.
Okay, so in that particular case, we can add into E, fencing, period,
Yes.
okay?
So basically, you strike the qualification and there is.
Correct.
Speaking out of turn?
No, there's a void there, though. We go by her staff report, as you know, and you recommended, and we followed that to a point. The disagreement sometimes, not a real disagreement, but we have, sometimes we may have a communication breakdown, so that then we can discuss. I think the biggest problem we have with fences is how far it can come up on your property of the building. That's the discussion we get in. Are you correct?
Mm-hmm.
I mean.
What's defined as the corners of the backyard?
How far can you come from the backyard to the corner of the front of your structure?
Right.
That's where we tend to have some disagreement, and we work it out because is there an article or?
There's a drawing that we use to help explain it.
Right, so we do have a grid.
Okay, so again, I come back to, is fences adequately defined in zoning space such that the zoning administrator can handle fences and the board no longer needs to see fences?
I say no.
Okay, well then, that's to be dealt with later, okay?
Is it
It's-
specifically stated in the zoning ordinance what you're talking about on fences, or are you just kind of coming
No,
up with?
there is zoning, yes.
Well, if I may, this is part of the work that this consultant's gonna
Right.
iron out. Okay, this consultant we're bringing on board is gonna evaluate these, what's the standard, what's not, what belongs where. So we don't really have to resolve this point right now.
It could be better written and clarity in the current zoning ordinance. I think there is some ambiguity in it, but I think we're hearing there's consensus down the road. If we can clean up that ambiguity, we'd come back and amend the section.
That's what I'm recommending.
Right.
Do that, and then we come back.
So
for
we can
Article
keep
8.
it as is, but down the
Correct.
road, we do feel fencing could move to an administrative function if we fix the zoning ordinance defining the standards of fencing.
Agreed.
Okay.
We'll call that out to the.
All right, so
Perfect.
can I propose
Future work.
under H, we talked about H. I'll make a motion that we change the language there, and I want to delete significantly, because that was a concern you had the other day, and just rewrite it to say additions or deletions to an existing building which are not visible from a public street or sidewalk, period. And leave then alleys in this context are, right?
Leave alleys in there?
Yeah,
And you wanna take out, and which will not significantly alter?
yes.
Okay, take that out.
Staff agrees with that. Diane brought that to our attention, and it's very ambiguous there. It's just not well worded at all. I agree with that recommendation.
Okay, can you,
Say it again?
can you say it again
Okay,
and make
so
a motion?
H, I propose as a motion to be changed to additions or deletions to an existing building which are not visible from a public street or sidewalk, period.
Oh, from a public street.
So you keep addition.
Alleys in this context are not to be considered public places.
Then we're keeping the rest of it.
Okay, so we have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
We got a second from Jim.
Are we leaving in, and which will not significantly alter the?
No, that's coming out.
No, that's coming out.
That was Diane's comment the other day is,
Just to make sure we're all clear.
Any other discussion?
So I had a motion from Paul on that one.
Yep.
Jim Holloway, second.
Paul and Jim.
Thank you.
Just a question to, adding a deck, which does not seem to fall under any of the other ones, would be an addition generally to the rear of a building.
correct.
Does that mean decks now,
Well, I was gonna say decks are covered specifically in section 8.18C3 subsection D.
Yeah, because right now this is
Will
just
that-
under,
will that work together then? Because we're saying you can put anything you want on, you can do whatever you want to a back of a house.
Well, no, if I'm a corner house, I'm stuck,
Yeah, right.
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 okay?
But any other
And
house.
if I have a lot, you walk around, there's a lot of visibility from a sidewalk or a street to a lot of backyards. Okay?
So anything in the backyard is okay, as long as it's not a corner lot. It does not come under the historic district review board purview.
Correct.
It's not visible from a public street or sidewalk.
Alleys, I think alleys are public spaces. I mean, you have trash going down there.
That's correct, and that's why I specifically eliminated, because people don't walk around down alleys as they would out on the street or on sidewalks.
I'm saying they are public places.
They are, officially, they are a public place. I am excluding it in this particular clause and saying, no, in that context, it's not a public place. And it's called out right there.
Why, it is a public place, why are you saying that?
Because I don't feel somebody walking down an alley is gonna take into consideration historic backyards. And I'm excluding that aspect. Preserving the character of,
What if they built some crazy addition in the back that has no?
wait, this is minor alterations. This is the only section we're dealing with, is minor alterations that do not have to go to the Historic District Review Board. So all of these,
Say minor.
it does.
the title
The
says.
title, certain minor actions exempted. So I wanna make clear what we're talking about here.
Well, I don't think an addition or a deletion to an existing building is a minor action.
So again, when you actually go down a little bit further, when we get to what does get reviewed, what's considered substantial, then you have to go read all of those. And again, when somebody puts their application in, we need to see what they're proposing to do and make a decision, an interpretation of their work. Is this minor or really is this major? If they're getting rid of a deck, That could be major, because decks are covered under substantial additions,
In that case, should there be
substantial alterations, that's the word you guys use.
should there be a distinction made, saying what is minor and what is major, I guess, so there isn't that confusion? Or it could just be anything that is not considered, anything that's not considered major or specifically called out in section 8.18 would be considered minor.
I think you're right with that. There has to be some qualification.
In that case, it also could just be that those sections may just be needed to switch, so what goes in front of the review board comes first, so that's in people's mind, and then the exemptions come after. That way, again, it's just train of thought, I guess.
I do find 8.16 through 8.18 just garbled. It doesn't go
Flow
together
well?
for me.
Okay, so I think that's an excellent point, Diane, and what I'd like to do, if the board is willing, is see if we can put a pause on our discussion of 8.16, and then let's go look at 8.18, so you can see what truly falls under the domain of the Historic District Review
We
Board.
have a motion on the floor.
Oh, yes, we do, we still have a motion.
So,
What is the motion?
The motion is,
I was gonna say, since, if you don't mind, stop throwing off here. So the motion is, and the first off, to strike right of way and replace that with with street or sidewalk, and to remove the word significantly alter from section H.
And
Remove
which?
all of it, not just the.
All of it.
remove all of it.
You're gonna remove all the words except straight or sidewalk.
Okay, thank you.
And retain the second sentence of that.
And retain the second sentence.
So could we switch alleyways in this context are not to be considered public streets? Would that, instead of
I think better than
places?
I think another word needs to be there. And
Paul, does
streets
that
would
still
be fine
fit?
because it's referring up to what we've already
At the
discussed,
beginning.
which is public streets.
That's fine. We can
that's fine.
Okay.
Got that?
Okay, so we have a motion and a second.
Yes.
Any further discussion on that? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Now, do you want to go to 8:18?
Why not?
Katie?
Okay, so we're gonna switch hats now. So this is everything that does require the Historic District Review Board to look at. And there are a couple of changes that have been outlined here, and some of it really is more to refer you to what is already their domain today, okay? So as we're working our way through, contributing accessory structures is referenced as a new item here. Listed as contributing primary structures under the following conditions. I do know from staff we had a little confusion as to how some of this was written, but let me walk through it first. If it's on a permanent foundation, sufficient square footage, that a new structure of that type would require a building permit. Right now, just so everybody's clear what that is, a building permit is required at 256 square feet under the current code, under the current building code. The third one does confuse us a little bit, so go for it, Ben.
Sure. Thank you. So, as Kay mentioned, number 3 is, the wording is a bit confusing and doesn't really make it readily apparent when the accessory structure is treated as a contributing primary structure. The suggested language that I would put forward is the accessory structure will be considered non-contributing if it is not used as or being considered for accessory dwelling units. It just kind of flips the 2 lines around.
I think
Yeah.
we really want to ask you, Paul or John, what did you mean by number 3?
All right, so let's. Yeah, good.
Say it, man.
That's the better question. The question is, when we adopt the 1964 register, we bring in a ton of sheds and garages and accessory structures into play, both contributing and non-contributing. So right now, when you go to the 1940 version, very few are listed. We adopt the 64, we brought in probably 250 structures of that kind of fashion, half of which are contributing and the other half non-contributing. So the question came in, and we've had cases where people have converted their garages or what have you in the backyards, accessory buildings, into accessory dwelling units, and that's really condoned by the desire through the comprehensive plan that we want to promote infill with smaller units. So the question then comes, who wins out if I have a contributing structure, an accessory building, and I want to convert that into an accessory dwelling unit? And in this particular case, what we're saying is the accessory dwelling unit would win out. We don't think there would be many cases of that occurring, but we had to address it in some fashion. And that's what the wording hopefully conveys.
This was discussed during our work session, was the whole, again, as Paul said, adopting 64 brings all these structures in. So it was the consensus of the group during that work session that these were the targets you had to hit. Now, I'm all about wordsmithing it to make it clearer if that helps. But these were the things that were discussed in the work session, that if these things, you have to have all of these things, not one of them, but all of these things in order for it to be considered contributing.
Okay, so just so I'm clear from my end, so if it's not being used as an accessory dwelling unit, nor applying for a permit to be used as an accessory dwelling unit, it would not be considered a contributing structure?
Right.
Okay.
Well, no, that totally confuses me.
No, it's just the opposite.
I think it's the
Right.
opposite.
It's exactly the opposite. If it is being used or being considered for an accessory
Oh,
Then it-
that's what I thought.
Then
then it would not be contributing.
It would not be contributing.
Exactly.
Okay.
Nor if it was below what a permit would require. And
Right.
Thank you for pointing out 256 square feet, or if it's not on a permanent foundation. If any of those things happen, it would not be considered contributing. So that was, and that can change. I'm just saying that was the discussion at the work session. So that's what the group talked about. So that's why it's there.
So if we have a contributing structure in the backyard, as per 1964, and you choose to make it an accessory dwelling unit, then that desire trumps keeping that contributing
Historical,
structure
yes.
as it is.
Right.
Yes.
And then that makes accessory dwelling unit non-contributing.
Correct.
Do we have any recourse if we think it is a particularly important historical structure, like the outhouses on Caswell?
As written, it would say no right now, because I'm not aware of anything that would be so outstanding in the way of an accessory structure.
Well, I just mentioned one. The outhouses on Caswell. Now, I haven't been in them, so maybe there's nothing there that's original. But we can't make the assumption there isn't, and in this case, it would allow someone to knock those down and put up an accessory dwelling unit.
Well, they probably wouldn't use square footage requirement either, would they?
Well, the accessory dwelling unit would. You'd most likely be over 256 square foot and putting in a permanent foundation. That was the whole purpose here. Who wins out?
Okay.
Accessory dwelling unit or a shed? We can't ignore it because we have people that have been coming to create accessory dwelling units.
Okay, there is an opportunity in here to, say something is historical and needs to be saved. Are we saying that are not doing that? So we would not go to those outhouses and say, oh, this is an important historical.
As currently written, yes, but let me just put it a little bit of context. Right now, prior to this being adopted, we're not considering it now. Because none of those structures are considered contributing, because we haven't adopted the 64 standard yet, right? So right now, someone can take that away, and there's nothing you can do about it. So if this is adopted, some of those things get brought in, what do we do? So that was a discussion at the work session, and a number of people didn't think that any of it should be contributing, but some people thought they were, or should, so that's why they kind of came up with this criteria. If it meets these criteria, it should stay as contributing, if it doesn't, it doesn't. But this is all brand new, and this is the purpose of this process. Do you want to make a different recommendation? Now's the time to do it.
Can I just ask a question on the wording? Because I'm still not sure I understand what we're including and not
Right.
including. If we remove the word not, so it says, it is being used or being considered for accessory dwelling unit, and we drop the last sentence, does it mean what you want it to mean? It's the multiple negatives that
It is, it's
confuse
throwing
me.
me off.
Okay, it is, but if you look at the opening sentence, contributing accessory structure will be treated as contributing primary structures only under the following conditions.
Right.
Okay,
And that would be if it's being considered, used for, or considered for an accessory dwelling unit.
Oh, no, I see what it
It's the
means here.
exact opposite.
So what he's saying is that the B, the first sentence, that's in the positive. So so if we take out the not, if it is being used or being considered for accessory dwelling unit, that means it meets the condition for a contributing accessory being treated as a primary contributing structure. So it does have to have that not. It does make it a bit confusing.
You got better wording, I'm all.
I will work on it.
I think the word primary is confusing to me. Contributing accessory structures will be treated as contributing primary structures.
I was gonna say, is there a difference? I'm not
Yeah,
familiar enough with
the word primary doesn't add or delete from that.
Why
I
do we
can
have
see
to
offhand.
define which is primary and which is accessory under this?
In the listing from the National Historic, they now give us, the house, and they give us an age, and they call that a contributing. They're now also giving us the shed, and they're giving us an approximate age and calling that contributing,
Or non-contributing.
or non-contributing.
But they're not saying anything about primary.
Right,
No.
do we need to distinguish between primary and,
I think
Not
I think it's trying to recognize if we're moving the date of where we're considering our window of review, we need to recognize all these accessory structures that have got sucked in. And I think we're trying to figure out, okay, how they're being used. Is it relevant or not relevant? And I think that's what number 3 is trying to get to. So if the accessory structure is a dwelling unit, it will, I gotta make sure I'm saying this the right way, I feel like I'm still getting it wrong, will not be considered a contributing structure.
Correct.
Okay. Maybe it's that last sentence that's,
Say that again.
so if it's being used, if the accessory structure is a dwelling unit, then it is not a contributing,
So this
structure.
is for accessory unit
Is that
so if you
correct?
have a
I'm gonna
contributing
say it one more
structure
time.
And they want to
I
change
know.
it over to
Say it
a
one more
dwelling
time.
unit. That
So
makes-
Oh,
if-
good. One conversation, please.
One conversation at a time, please.
So if the accessory structure is considered a dwelling unit, an accessory dwelling unit, then it is not going to be a contributing structure in the historic district. So somebody takes their garage, keeps the garage, but turns the entire second floor into an accessory dwelling unit. Then we're going to say that trumps, we care about the use more than the historic designation that might have been placed on here. Is that, am I
Yes.
getting that correct?
That's the intent.
Okay.
I would really like to push for taking that word primary out of there. That is, I think, confusing,
Okay,
because
that's not a problem.
the house is the primary structure.
That's fine.
All right.
So in the beginning of B, you're proposing that we delete, primary within that sentence,
Yeah, so let me officially make a motion.
okay?
In section 8.18B, remove the word primary from the opening sentence.
I'd like to make another change.
Well, we have another one on 3.
I was gonna say, why can't we just say contributing accessory structures will be treated as contributing only under the following conditions?
I think, yeah, and I think 3 works if we actually get rid of the whole second sentence. That's what's throwing me off.
Are you allowing?
All right, well, okay, so you gotta worry about an accessory structure may be already designated contributing or non-contributing.
Right?
So what we're saying in this particular case, if it's designated as a contributing structure and they're looking to make it into an accessory dwelling unit, these conditions would apply.
Paul, are you accepting any comments from?
I'm not accepting anything, the chairman, your turn.
That's obvious.
Are you allowing him to speak?
Sure. Go ahead.
My only point is that if you take a historic building that has been renovated and they add an accessory building that's going to be, you know, with an apartment over it, why would you ever allow that to be different than the house? There are many in this town that have been redone, made from a one-story to a 2-story, and they were trimmed out and such to look like they match the house. What you're gonna look like, in my opinion, if you allow it not to be a contributing structure, it's gonna look like a trailer park division. Because you'll have all these vinyl and aluminum and tin with no architectural respect whatsoever.
And I agree with you 100% there, and rather than have Article 8 deal with that, the design guidelines should be dealing with those particular requirements.
I think that's where you would do it when you're designing, you know, in your mind what you want as an accessory building. Excuse me, but I just.
Well, why wouldn't you just say contributing accessory structures are, 1, on a permanent foundation, 2, of sufficient whatever, and 3, why do we need all of this will be treated as contributing structures only under the following conditions? This is what a contributing accessory structure is.
Well, weren't you all at the work session? You all heard this before. Didn't you all think about this and how it was going to be evaluated? Come to the conclusion? We have a motion
Yeah,
on
we have a motion,
the line B.
but we don't have a second yet.
No, I don't have a second yet.
Second.
Dennis?
Okay, so we have a motion and a second to remove the word primary
Right.
out of 8.18B. Now I want to move on here too. So, is there any further discussion on this?
yes, I still think we ought to just take all of that out, just say contributing accessory structure is.
Any other discussion? All right, take a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay, one opposed. All right. Katie?
Thank you.
Before we move on,
Yeah.
I like Katie's recommendation. I think it makes it less confusing. The second sentence in B3 is unnecessary. I agree.
I think it is
I think
unnecessary.
if you take that second sentence out, it's much clearer.
Yeah.
that was what was confusing.
Yeah.
me.
Well, I
Yes.
think-
So you're saying it is of sufficient square footage, all that would come out?
No, that's
No.
the,
B3.
Second sentence of 3.
Second sentence.
Yeah, it would just
I
read,
think-
one of the conditions,
Well-
it is not being used as or being considered for an accessory dwelling unit, period. Just drop
Right.
that sentence.
Oh, I see, okay, it is not being.
Katie, won't there be a revision based on everything we've talked about?
yeah, I'm making notes as to what
Okay.
your potential motion might be. Yes.
Okay, I have no problems with taking that second sentence out, so I'll make a motion in section 8.18B3, the second sentence is deleted.
Second.
Okay, motion and second. Further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right.
I'd like to make a motion that B3 be removed. I think that accessory structures that are being used as dwelling units should still fall under the design guidelines.
Okay, I'm not disagreeing, it will still go to the board, okay, but it will have criteria set aside for whether it's considered contributing or non-contributing, and specifically be reviewed under those guidelines. This doesn't say it doesn't go to the board,
Okay.
okay?
But if it's in the backyard and you can't see it from a public street.
Well, now,
is that
yes,
gonna work?
now you're starting to inject other criteria, yes, it may come down to that. But I'd be hard pressed for an accessory structure not to be seen and hidden by the house. Could be, but
But Paul, I think you're saying if it's contributing as an accessory dwelling now, and then you add it on, you make it non-contributing, you have two different sets of guidelines.
correct, that's correct.
For one structure. Now that gets real confusing.
Well, it depends on how you write the next revision of the design guidelines.
I think that's almost gonna be impossible. How are you gonna treat one half of the building one way and the other half a different way?
Because I can say the accessory structure needs to be compatible with the primary residence.
That's compatible, but that, if one's deemed contributing, you have one set of guidelines, that's the route we're going.
Correct.
And the non-contributing is gonna be a different set of guidelines. Then how are you gonna have one structure with two meanings? With two
Because I-
definitions?
Because I can write into my design guidelines how I'm gonna handle that particular situation.
Well, that remains to be seen.
Yeah, it will, and that's what I'm saying, that's the next step in this process.
When do we think we're gonna have design guidelines, new ones?
So if I just have one more thought that's just popped into my head. Keep in mind for accessory dwelling units, those all require conditional use permits. And so council has the right to establish any requirements or conditions they want when they pass a conditional use permit. So I'm just making you aware, there's another bite at the apple to establish whatever they feel is appropriate in approving an accessory dwelling unit. Sorry, just had that
And
thought.
based on that information on conditional use permits and Paul's description of how this still would be guidelines associated with this, I'd remove that.
Okay.
request.
You
Okay.
withdraw your motion?
I do.
All right.
Thank you. Okay, so moving on into still section 8.18 as a whole. This really talks about all the areas that are under the governance of the Historic District Review Board. So I really wanted to make sure we had a chance to look at this so you can see what really clearly still falls under their purview, regardless of what might be under the minor additions. I have to read both sections when I am reviewing an application into the office. So if somebody says they're just fixing a board or two on a deck, that's minor. If somebody says they're ripping out the whole deck and changing it, that's the board. I just want you guys to understand the differences that go before them versus what stays as a minor alteration. But take a minute to make sure you're reading through it, see if you have any further questions.
All right, so what are you pointing to now? What section?
Just as a whole, all of this section of what's considered substantial alterations. Granted, there aren't a lot of changes, but I just wanted to kind of refresh everybody's memory what is under that purview of the Historic District Review Board.
Well, if you go to the definition of alteration, it says any exterior change. Any exterior change. So what would substantial alteration be? Any change is an alteration, so maybe you don't want to use the word alteration.
I think D lists a bunch of that.
Think what?
I think where we have, yeah, they're sort of defined under B through F, or E maybe.
Of C. 3.
Oh, substantial,
All right, I'm not hearing you very well. Please say that again.
I think when you talk about alterations that are considered major or substantial, they're being listed out here in B through E.
So just to, sorry, just
Yeah.
to clarify, it's gonna be section C, subsection 3, beginning with general examples of work constituting substantial alterations include.
So you're saying there's 2 levels of alterations?
Correct.
There's minor alterations, those can be exempt. Then there are substantial alterations or alterations that would go before the Historic District Review Board because they're not clearly spelled out under minor alterations that are exempt. So some are obvious. If it's a new house going in, that's clearly going to them. If it's an addition, that's going to them. If they are replacing their windows, maybe not. If they're replacing it exactly as is with exactly the same style, that can be handled as a minor alteration. But if they want to, if they want to change the pane style, or if they want to change the location, just a smidge, that's got to go to them. Okay? I just wanted to refresh everybody's memory. There's not a lot of changes being proposed in this section, but I think it's relevant when we then go back to look one more time at the minor alterations to see if we're really addressing some of the complaints or comments that have been heard from the citizenry. Could some things be done in an administrative process versus going to the Historic District Review Board?
The last 2 words of C are problematic.
What point to it?
3,
Yep.
yeah, exactly.
Yep.
Yes, right. Yes.
And the like.
I'm not following where you're pointing to, please.
Okay.
3C.
On page 7.
3C, okay.
3C. C.
Okay, I see.
Oh, 3C, period, yeah, right.
And why wouldn't you just say any alteration of the exterior architectural style of a structure? Why do you have to say including?
Well, they could say including,
Yeah,
just add it to the
just
terraces.
adding items for clarity.
Well, and do you think that clarifies? Because I find when you add things like that then that gives you more ability to question it. Well, I'm not really building a porch, I'm building a sun. Or something like that. They can question whether what they're doing falls under these kinds of things. Whereas if you say any change of the exterior, architectural style, structure, period, then there's no question.
Because we were saying there are things that are minor. So if you say any change, then replacing a window pane could not be done.
Well, but you're under substantial alterations, right? Let's see. General examples of work constituting substantial alterations.
I was gonna say,
But this includes windows.
I meant, you have a broken window pane, you want to replace that. There's a board that falls off, you want to replace the board. That's a change. And so if you just leave it at any change, then you couldn't do those things without getting specific approval.
It says any change of the exterior architectural style. So replacing a board would not be changing the architectural style.
Well,
would
that's
it,
that's open for interpretation too, so I mean,
would it help instead of the word including removal or rebuilding porches, it'd be, changing that word to examples being? So the people reading it have some sort of guideline of what, kind of exterior architectural, or what exterior architectural style, or change to that of that structure. And so instead of saying including, being say examples including.
I think that's excellent because in some people may not think their chimney is an architectural style. They just may think it's the chimney that came with the house. The house itself has a style, with or without a chimney may not be a requirement of that style. So I think giving some examples so that people understand all the elements that we would consider require review is good in this document.
Then I think the word including should be changed to something like examples, or, so that it's absolutely clear that that's not it.
And then we can take out the last three words.
All right, so,
Yeah, and the
let,
like means straight out, yeah.
all right, so let me propose
for example.
for section 8:18, C3, C, remove the word including and insert examples being,
Or some examples being.
some examples being,
Mhm.
and remove the last three words and insert "and" before terraces.
Yes. Yeah. Second.
Did you get that?
Do you want to?
What was your last addition, Paul?
Remove the last three words
Just
and
remove
the
it.
like,
And put the word "and" before
and
terraces.
before
Terraces.
terraces.
And terraces, got it.
Right, right.
Since the definition of alteration is any change, should you just say alteration as opposed to any change or alteration? And just put any alteration of the exterior architectural style?
Yeah, to me, it's the same, alteration or change is the same wording, right? So you're
Well,
saying,
we
you're
can
saying
do one or the
drop
other, but
one?
You do have a definition of alteration, whereas you don't have a definition of change.
All right, so I'll add to my motion that we strike change or,
Yeah.
Second.
Okay, so a motion and a second is on the floor. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
If we're gonna get to be productive tonight, we might wanna take a break. Just stating the obvious, people. Just stating the obvious.
Dennis.
Oh,
I
Just
suggest
order,
if we're
you know,
gonna make,
order out and have people bring it, get like
But
a
I know
pizza.
what is near and dear to his heart. He wants to get to the comp plan.
but if we're gonna make that change to C, we should make the same exact change to D.
Yeah, okay, whatever.
So any alteration, take the change or out.
So in 8.18C3D, do I have a motion that we would also delete or alter?
I make a motion, we take the change
change
or out
or.
of 8:18,
C3D.
yes.
Okay, so we have a motion.
Why is D different than C?
It just is.
It's the first 4 words.
Okay.
Don't fight it, Diane.
I think C is the overall style, and D talks about significant elements within the style.
Yes, but then it gives examples
Yeah,
as porches.
I'm with you on that.
Yeah.
Sorry, just to clarify, who for the 3D, who was putting forward those motions and seconded?
So far, Jim has put it forward. I don't have a second.
We don't have a second.
I mean, I like the idea that you have to say about significant elements, but I think we better explain what significant elements are different than those put in C.
We got awnings and canopies and sashes, or awnings and canopies that are in columns. You got
Yeah, so all you're left with is.
Could you combine the two of them to say any alteration to the exterior architectural style or its significant elements?
You could.
For example,
Yeah, you could, yeah.
Good.
And then we list all of these.
And then you have
right,
a
and
little,
then we have to move
little bit
awnings and canopies
longer list
up
maybe.
into that.
Yeah. Not terribly longer, actually.
All right, so.
That's a good idea.
Okay, so if I hear this correctly, then, we can do away with D and put those other into C?
No, we have to say significant elements, don't we?
Well, yeah.
Any alteration of the exterior architectural style of a structure or any of its significant elements.
Elements. Right.
So,
For and what'd we say, for example?
For
Some
example.
examples being,
Yeah,
yeah.
and then we're gonna list all these things as examples that are both in C and D.
right.
Yeah,
Yeah, because we have a lot of repeats, so it's probably not all of them.
We will clean
That's
it up
true.
so that we only say it once.
Okay.
right.
Yes.
Good.
Okay,
I wholly understand your intent and motion here. Yes.
okay.
List all examples. Okay, so that's Jim,
Yeah.
And I'll second that.
thank you. Jim made the motion and Paul seconded.
All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Did we need a?
There was actually, sorry,
Go for it.
this may be end up struck because, you know, we're combining C and D. But there was one concern about the last line in D saying this applies to all structures on the site. And so that means that any structure that's on the site would have to go in front of the review board. And so
Even if it's an accessory dwelling,
that's,
because that's what it
Correct.
is, right?
yeah,
That's correct.
yeah, so
That
it's.
is what it should say.
Again, so again, because we're combining C and D, this may be, you know, a moot point, because that could just end, because if we're just combining the examples of significant elements and, what was it, exterior architectural structure, it could be that the last line, this applies to all structures, just doesn't make the move. And dropped with the rest of D.
That's a very good point.
Yeah. Because it would apply if you could see it from the street. So that is already back in
Mm-hmm.
somewhere. So we don't need to say this also applies to all structures on the site because that's already covered.
Well, even then, it covers
Paul,
even more
are there
because
any-
it specifically
any-
says all structures on site. So that means even,
Backyards that face the park,
Yes, bunch?
is the park considered an appropriate place to make those decisions as to whether or not they're,
No, because we said streets or sidewalks. There's
Yeah,
no
you got
streets or
sidewalks.
in
okay,
Right.
I just want to make sure it's clear, that's all, okay.
But I don't see any reason to, I don't see why we can't drop that last sentence.
Yeah.
I don't either.
All right, so I'll make a motion that we drop the last sentence in D as well.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Katie?
I got it, okay. Okay, so if we can just go back up for just a second, just a minute, and I'm bringing us back to 8.16. Now that we've worked our way through what items do go to the Historic District Review Board, are you good with what we've proposed for the minor actions exempted from review from the Historic District Review Board? So they are handled administratively by the zoning administrator.
Knowing that we may make more changes after the consultants go
Right.
through things.
Right.
I would suggest, as I think Ben did earlier, we move 18 to before what is currently 16. We move the major things first and minor second.
So you're saying move all of section 8.18 ahead of 8.16.
.16, yeah.
So that's what we are told to use, pull from Dropbox, bring it into there.
So what do you have to go to the board for? What do you could possibly now look at minor things that could be handled
Go ahead and use
in
Dropbox, that's fine,
administratively?
but that needs a network connection.
We're having a little technical challenges here at the moment. I want to make sure everybody can see the document.
Yeah, well, he's having problems keeping his document in place.
Okay. So I'm hearing that we're proposing a renumbering of sections at this point to move 8.18 ahead in our zoning ordinance to come before section 8.16. Is that what you're proposing?
Yes.
Yes.
sorry, well, just to make sure, if if that is what you're suggesting, that, 8.18, because to make things less complicated, I was just suggesting switching the text of 8.18 with 8.16. That way, 8.17 doesn't end up having to get a number change. I'm not sure if that makes any difference, but if 8.18 goes before,
No, the
No,
numbering
it's-
happens
yeah.
sequentially, so
Just
that, no,
renumber it to
that's
be
not really
16
relevant.
and
Okay.
make-
Right.
alright,
Yeah.
So is everybody good moving 8.18?
Yeah, so who made that motion? I'll second it.
Okay.
All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Now, you're gonna have to watch through the document, because you do have references to those sections.
I'm gonna have to go through and edit it so it appropriately references the new numbering.
Right.
Sorry, let me just finish taking my note. There we go. Okay, then we are down to certificate of appropriateness. There are
Well,
just,
wait a minute.
Um,
I want to talk about delegation of authority. situation where someone took the slate roof off a building on a Sunday?
And that's the responsibility of the building official and the zoning administrator for the enforcement of working without a permit, in both cases.
How do you enforce that on a Sunday if you're not working?
We come after them after the fact, and potentially we make them undo the work, or they pay fees, or they pay penalties. That's a responsibility of the building official and the zoning administrator per code.
Can that be overridden by the town council? I mean, you could say you have to put a slate roof back on that building, and the town council say, no, you don't have to?
I don't think so. In our,
Well, especially if they did it without a building permit, because if going off what Kate mentioned about building codes is done at the state level, that supersedes anything that the town council could say.
And that's a very particular example, because again, when it did come before the historic, because it still had to go before that review process, necessarily the material of replacing it of slate to slate may not have been the end result. Slate may not have been a financial possibility.
Except they had slate.
They had slate, and it was damaged, and
Well, don't
it
they-
had to be, that you do not have to replace it slate to slate. No, that is not an absolute requirement. No.
Really?
Mhm.
It could have been slate to slate, but it was already done, it was after the fact.
Right.
Right, I know.
Right.
Well, I think that's a prevailing sentiment in the town. Do it, then ask, for forgiveness or permission or whatever. I have heard that stated.
That's a whole different ordinance discussion than this particular chapter.
Well, my point here is, if in this particular situation, the roof was being taken off and it was on a Sunday, if there was no building permit, couldn't the police have been gone up there and said, you have to stop?
I don't mean to be rude, but I think we're really
Yeah,
far
that's-
outside the
that's kind of-
purview of this particular ordinance review that we're doing right now. And I'm happy to entertain that at a future work session of this board to look through those ordinances that deal with working without permits and what our penalty section is on our ordinance and propose potential recommendations to the town council. I just don't think it's covered under this conversation this evening.
Yeah, and there's an issue with using police force outside the bounds of their training and how many times they get them into trouble.
Yeah, that question would definitely be more appropriate when it comes to discussing, again, the penalties applied to working without permits. And preferably that should be done, that enforcement should be done wholly within the planning and zoning department if possible.
And building.
And building, yes, thank you.
All right. Okay. Is it okay if we move on?
Yes,
Yes.
Thank you.
please.
Moving down to certificate of appropriateness. Just again, some minor tweaks to this section. Then down to.
Wait a minute.
8.19.
Why is the on behalf of inserted in there, the historic board issues a certificate of appropriateness, but it's, the minor tweet says on behalf of the historic district review board.
you
You don't physically do it, you authorize it, you don't physically.
You don't sign it, it goes from their office to the applicant. It's a
It's
certificate.
procedurally. It's,
Okay,
it's,
okay, I just wanted to hear something about that.
our more than competent technician here gets all that paperwork done, and she's the one who transmits it to the applicant as to what was approved under that certificate of appropriateness.
Okay, thank you,
That's all.
okay.
Okay, 8.20, your design guidelines. There are some changes proposed in here.
Just a comment on there. It says the board is expected to work. Now, you don't want the applicant to bring us whole bunch of stuff and say, here to the board, here, design something for me. They're encouraged to work, to get things, you know, but this looks a little too strong to me.
I think it looks very adversarial to me. And I don't like the thought that the board is expected to work with each applicant to assist them in achieving their goal. Aren't they working together? I mean, to me, this is saying that the board is going to give way to the applicant.
I don't think it says that.
No, I don't think it says that either.
Could say
It just-
that the board is encouraged to work with each.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to say, encouraged, I mean, that's what the board does, really.
Well, why is that even in there? I think we're trying to take all the reasons that people are complaining and put them in here so we can say, no, see, we've taken care of that. But I don't see that many of those things have been taken care of by these changes. And this is one of them.
We're talking about making changes to the various pieces of content to make it clear that the board is not a preservationist board. It's one that's more concerned about maintaining the character of the architecture of the contributing structures. And
So,
even though the board has actively worked as a partner, just based on the stats, this says it I think, pretty clearly.
I think if that's what we want, then that has to be stated very clearly. And that is not really stated very clearly, because if we look at the beginning of this, where it kept these three little paragraphs at the beginning of this, it really speaks about saving our history and passing it on to people.
Absolutely.
Of future
Yeah.
You're not saving your history if you're letting them build something or redo a historical building. Just in character. In character. Why don't we just make them build the buildings that are now being built in Bay Creek, because they look great. So let's just
Now,
do that.
that's not what the board's gonna do.
This is saying, you're you're saying right now that, oh, you go off and do your thing and you bring us the stuff and we won't work with you. That's what you're saying.
No, that's not.
Well, then tell me why that second sentence there is not good. I mean, if we change it to encourage, instead it's expected to work with each applicant to assist them.
If I can give an example, I believe early in our renovation, and it might have been Ed, I'm not positive, but we went, we met, and we had some questions, can we do this, can we do that? And it was a very positive,
Yes.
you know, yeah, you can do some of these you have to apply, but you can do some of these kinds of, that you're probably not gonna get away with, you know, for example, we had considered shutters. And you could see that there was the hardware on there that with the we had no pictures that there were ever really shutters. Could have just been the hardware. So we said, all right, based on all of that, we're not going to go there. So to me, that's a very positive way that a board member, and I don't think this means the entire board collectively, worked with an applicant to achieve our goal. And some of which, you know, we just changed our process. So I think it's what we're doing, it just codifies it.
Yes, but what you're speaking of, that is actually spoken about later, when it talks about, you know, how are we going through all this, what are our procedures? I don't think I dislike the emphasis, I dislike the tone of it. And I don't think it's necessary. Sorry, Dennis.
No, it's okay, it's all right. If you don't characterize that relationship between the board and the applicant, how do you justify this section of design guidelines? there's nobody there to work with the applicant to make sure they're abiding by the guidelines.
Why is there nobody there?
If you don't have that writing in there that puts it in context as to what these guidelines are intended to provide, as a resource for the board to work with the applicant to make sure that they get their needs met and still maintain the character of the architecture, the face of the architecture.
Can I interject?
Certainly.
I think we accomplished some of that with our pre-application meeting.
Right.
That's what the pre-application meetings are about, to get the applicant familiar with what we're looking for and to work with them to try to accomplish the goals before the final application, formal application is,
I think we've started doing that, and I think we've gotten through the last 100 applications without any problems.
Right, exactly.
So,
That's why I'm
you know, I
saying
think
this
we're
sentence
already
isn't necessary.
gone a long way towards correcting what might have been in the past some problems. So I don't know in terms of stating or not, I just like to say that it's encouraged, so,
I agree with the encouraged part.
that's all.
And the board should wear pink shirts at every meeting. I mean, to me, that is how stupid this sentence is. The board, of course the board is expected to work with.
No, not if you
the
don't
Not
say it.
necessarily.
A board could say, we're not gonna do
Yeah,
that.
that's not our job.
Right,
Go
but
back and
that's
come
still
to us with
maybe
something that,
working with them.
No, it
You
isn't.
might be saying, look, you can't do this, you could do
Totally
that.
different. But if I'm the board 10 years from now, and that board says, we are not meeting with people at a time, we have a document. You read it, you figure it out.
It's already in here, though. It's already in here that they're meeting people in advance. You don't need that sentence.
I think we
What
did.
you went through is
But that's
already-
advanced. How about during the process if they have questions and stuff? I mean, you wanna work with them.
How often do they contact you?
Let's make
Other
the
than at
motion
your
on
meeting?
something.
Do they call you at home? Do they send you texts?
No, not really. On the street maybe, but,
Yeah.
I mean, we're not an adversarial board. We're there to we're there to get the goal that the town wants, to preserve the character of what we have and what we want to maintain.
And that's
We
what
have
we're
we have a very serious case with the lemon tree right now that is, it's very stressful. And we had a meeting about it. The architect, the owner of the building was there, and they're coming back the 8th of June with his new proposals. Because he understands what we want and what we will allow him to do, and then he's coming back to see if he can fit in architecturally what we told him the guidelines insist we do. Not that, it's not us, it's the book.
Right.
But we can be flexible. You can't just tell a gentleman or an architect or an owner, you gotta follow the book. We've never done that since I've been on the board, and Michael's a new member of the board. Ed and I've been on the board a while. We've never done that to anybody that I can remember, that we didn't try to give you another way to go to achieve your goal and still give us the character that we want. Like steps, wooden steps. I mean, it's clear. And we've had some serious things with homeowners that tore down the porch. Never even asked, never got a permit, just tore it off. And he finally understood that if you go up and down the whole street, count how many houses have wooden steps. He finally got it. Okay, we'll do it.
So if I could make a suggestion, what if this reads, the board will utilize the pre-application process as defined in section 8.24A to work with the applicant in complying with the design guidelines, or not complying, I can't find the right word. In
Adhere to?
meeting, say that,
adhere to?
in adhering to the design guidelines.
okay, well, I think, a little further on, there's gonna be some more changes about the pre-application process in accord with why we're doing it now, but if that would fit if that's gonna be the case, but,
Right.
okay.
So we can make reference that the way the board works with the applicant is through the pre-application process. Does that work?
Yeah.
We'll make those
Say-
tweaks to
yes.
that,
Say your
okay.
wording again, please.
So the board will work with each applicant through a pre-application process as defined in section 8.24A below. And leave it at that.
Okay, I'll make that as a motion.
Well,
Second.
Okay, motion second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Thank you, Katie.
Yep. Then moving down, we talk about a new section dealing with the infill lots, and separate guidelines will be developed for those.
Explain what you mean by infill lot, Katie.
So again, if I'm saying this wrong, Paul, please correct me, but again, you're dealing with a block of 5. And right now you have a house on this end, a house on this end, but nothing is in those middle lots. Those are infill lots.
Okay, all right.
If
So-
you have a house that you knock down, does that become an infill lot?
No.
Okay.
Under C, can you fix the reference to the state code? It's 15.2 dash.
Yes. I don't, yeah, cause it's -22, cause that's, yeah, you got a wrong citation there, yes. Up here, yes, circle that. Okay,
Can I ask,
Oh, sure.
the members that we have of the Historic District Review Board, if they think that separate guidelines are a good idea for infill?
I had a problem with that in the past, but I think it's necessary.
Okay. Okay.
Moving on to E. For all alterations and additions to non-contributing structures. Everybody okay with that?
Yeah.
Okay, 8.21, this is a brand new section,
Well,
as I
it's a
understand.
reinstatement
Okay,
of a previous section that we deleted inappropriately 2 years ago. We were told to, demolition was held, captured in a number of places in zoning space. This one dropped out, but when you come to historic, the state code is very specific on the requirements for demolishing a contributing or historic home.
Right.
So all I did was reinstate that whole section and make sure that the appropriate references to the state code were correct.
look, I think it looks good, yeah, myself.
Yeah, you really need to read through it to learn the process. It's very difficult to follow. And it's not easy to demolish a house if you want to demolish a contributing house.
And, the specific dollar amounts today, but I couldn't think of a better way to,
Yeah, this is right out of state code. Those are
Okay.
time limits and dollar amounts from
Okay.
the state code.
How old is that code? What, is there a date, a year? When that was put into effect?
It's been there for a long time.
So I'm just saying, do they update the figures?
Oh, they do. When the last time they touched this one, I don't know, but
I can find that out for you though. Okay, moving on, if we're good with this entire section.
well, let me just, one thing that I did change. 21B5, 21B5 talks about time limits after receipt of certain statements. It had 5 days, and I changed that into 5 business days.
Mm-hmm.
So that made it a little bit more flexible, that's all. So, It was lifted with that additional change.
Okay. Moving down to section 8.22. This includes that reference where the building official, or the code official as he's known as, has the sole authority where it relates to unsafe or dangerous structures.
So buildings are allowed to fall apart as long as they are not hazardous, deemed hazardous.
As long as they are not deemed dangerous or unsafe by the building official. And there are clear definitions as to what that means.
Yeah, you can stop what is considered demolition by neglect, and that's what this section covers.
Right.
I'm leaving my windows open, then I'm not coming back for 10 years.
Okay?
Is this section taken out of the building code section that says maintenance and preservation of all structures?
No, because this town has not adopted the maintenance.
Yes, we did.
Have you adopted the maintenance provisions
We
of the
did.
building code?
We did. Dave Farber and I both went to school together.
Okay.
There's a whole code on preservation of structures. You have to be boarded up windows and you have to have a new roof put on. There's
Yeah.
a whole code on.
Right, that's correct. So if you deem a dangerous structure or an unsafe structure, one of the remedies that is allowed under the Code of Virginia is boarding of windows with plywood or
That's
something.
mandatory, right.
Yes, that is a code requirement of Virginia.
Right,
And that is deemed acceptable as to remedying the danger,
right.
yes.
There's a whole new other paragraph other than boarding windows. You have to put a new roof on the structure.
That's why we leave it to the building official to enforce and administer it. So he sets that determination under state code. So if there's additional provisions we've adopted, we need to go look at that and make sure we've included it within his section of the town code.
Correct, but
Yes.
can you make sure that we are subscribed to that code? And-
Yes, I will look for that, yes.
Thank you.
Yep.
So we had a building, on Mason Avenue, that was gonna be our, what was it, our yoga store or whatever? And, that was a historic building. That was allowed to be knocked down because it was unsafe. But we did nothing to stop it from becoming increasingly unsafe. So does this section at all speak to that?
Seems to say that that's the code official's responsibility to do that.
Well, he didn't in that case, so I'm just asking if there's anything in this section.
I think this was brought up at the work session with Jeff. Jeff
Yes.
made a statement about what you're talking about, and I don't recall exactly.
So yeah, in this graph, if you keep reading through it, it says so certain elements. So if we see the continued deterioration of the property, it talks about that process as to how we have to attack it, I guess is the best way to say. Again, I give you the caveat with all of these, manpower is going to be your limitation in all of this. You have one building official, you have currently one zoning administrator.
Hold it to that.
Currently, the night could be over soon.
The way we're going, it's gonna be a while.
So part of that is, yes, I think there are the means within this ordinance that allow us to go after a homeowner, a property owner, to maintain their house and fix it accordingly. You may not get a beautiful home, but we can at least try and eliminate the further deterioration of it.
Right.
Part of it is, if they fail to act, then the town would need to step in and do the necessary remedies.
Which
That's-
is why that didn't happen.
That's money, that's money,
That's what was Jeff brought up.
Yes.
It would cost more for the town to
right,
stop the deterioration than it's worth.
right.
And
And-
yet, well, okay, so
Yes,
we're not
yes.
requiring preservation, then we can hardly require ourselves to pay for
Right.
preservation.
And that doesn't come free as charge, so if the town stepped forward and actually did the repairs, we then would place a lien on the property through their taxes. But again, if the house is getting that deteriorated, you kinda have to bet they're probably not paying their taxes either. So it is weighing what the community values here versus would you ever see the true return coming back to you of the homeowner paying that lien off as well. It's a big, and I'm sorry to say, it's a council responsibility when it's all said and done.
Okay.
Will they afford it? Can they afford it? And will they make it a priority to prevent this deterioration of properties? So,
Well, if we're not willing to pay for it, I don't even know why I'm going down this road, never mind.
so
The second,
That's
on
another
on
board.
B, the second line from the bottom, just again, it's administrator, preserve the integrity with a space between.
okay, yeah, we'll go through and do a spell check all the way through this and grammar, et cetera.
The problem on that is it's not a spell check thing, it was a conversion from it was a conversion from an Adobe document,
And it keeps carrying that?
and it doesn't show it as a misspelling, which is why they keep showing up. I keep trying to catch them every time someone points it out, but it's.
We're circling them all, so.
Yeah, so everybody sees the work, please point them out.
Okay. Moving on to 8.23. This talks about how we maintain our paperwork on all of this stuff.
Oh, okay, paperwork,
Yes, the paperwork, it never ends. 8.24.
Is 8.23 being done?
It is now being done in accordance with this.
Okay, when did that start?
It was changed based on the knowledge that I had of how this was being handled. And I said, okay, this was not in accordance with what's written, let's change it to what
Oh, okay.
we're doing.
So this is what was being done, and so we changed the wording to
Correct.
reflect what was being done.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, I think 8.24 needs some work because recently the process has just changed to where where pre-applications are now part of the regular board meeting and the entire board gets to have a look at this, and it seems to have worked much better this way, rather than at least one member being present. So I'd like, what we're doing, it's more work, but I don't think anybody minds on the board taking on that additional work, and so I'd like to see that captured here, rather than what's.
8.24 captures your pre-application.
8.24, it says
It says one member.
one
increase.
member, that's the part, that.
No, the way I worded it is at least, because we started out with one member, you have elected to go to the entire board. I've kept it for the flexibility of that reason.
You can do either way.
Okay.
You may
well,
have a certain situation where it's so straightforward, the zoning administrator talks to the board chair, and they agree, yep, we only need one person, go look at that one. So the flexibility is left there. Right now, you're
Well,
requiring it
well.
to come to the entire board.
Okay, I don't know, it's rare that one member of the board can really adequately
Well, I'm
address.
not arguing which way.
Okay,
I'm just
but-
saying, this wording allows the board to decide how they want to handle the
It
pre-applications.
just says you have to have at least one.
Okay.
The whole thing.
Before we get to
Yep.
that, on the 8, that was .23 and now is 2.4,
Oh.
you have second to last building or, and then we need to look at the number for the one below that, I guess it should be 2.5.
We'll fix the numbering, right.
Oh, okay,
Got it. 224.
Okay.
okay. So I meant 8.25 then, all right. Yeah, so, okay, as long as we can continue doing what we're doing through this wording, that's important. Okay.
Moving our way through. If you have any other suggestions or comments, I'm gonna keep on going
Well,
down.
the one comment or question I have is on D, requiring 3 hard copies and 1 electronic version.
And I'm gonna turn to Tracy for a second on this one to get her input from the staff who assembles all this material for our agenda packets, et cetera. I definitely know the 1 electronic version is a requirement. It helps us to have 1 hard copy at least so that we're ensuring we're getting everything that they intend. because sometimes they think they've submitted electronically and it didn't come through the right way. I don't think I need 3, but I'm gonna defer to you.
No, I've been just following one.
Okay, so can I make a motion to change D
Yes.
to 1 copy,
One hard copy.
1 hard copy?
Second.
Okay, motion and a second.
Oh.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Okay. 8.27. Again, we go through a couple little tweaks here. And again, this is really key, and I think we are much better at it in the office than we were before. That zoning approval has to happen before it goes to the Historic District Review Board.
Oh, got it, okay.
So that's really key, because if it's not gonna pass zoning muster, why waste their time?
Exactly.
That's
yes,
all I can
yes,
say.
Right.
Okay?
John, on the one before that, next to last line, such proposal, that's another non-spell check.
Okay, under 8.26.
Yes.
Such proposal. Okay,
Oh, yeah.
then under 8.28, this, I have to be honest, from a staff perspective, thank you. We actually love this change.
You love this change?
We love this change. And we're not trying to run the clock out on applicants, but giving us a little bit more time, because from the moment things come in to the moment we can get everything to a hearing, we were struggling to meet that 60-day mark.
Well, it's a practical matter too. I mean, I can't control when people walk out the door.
Yeah.
People go quick. Okay?
Right,
When
yep,
an application comes in, if it's not handled in a certain period of time, it's deemed approved. I mean,
Right,
you're not going to get
exactly.
anybody doing anything just
Yep.
because someone quits on me.
Yep.
So we need a little bit extra.
Yeah.
Is there any point in saying the time frame resets each time the HDRB is called upon? Does that help you in any way? The 90 days is sufficient?
It is sufficient, because we do think that from the moment we deem an application complete, and that's a really important
Right.
word,
Right.
deem it complete. Then the clock starts ticking for the Historic District Review Board to receive everything, convene into a meeting, and take their actions. So that's really important for us to get through that time frame timely, because people then have the right that if they don't like the decisions coming from the Historic District Review Board, they have the right to go appeal. We don't wish to really spend this out 6 months or 9 months on them. No, that's not what we're trying to do. But 90 days gets us where we need to be. We will advance it as soon as we can, but 90 is the max, and we're not trying to run it the full 90.
Right, you just want the flexibility to be able to deal with
Yes.
problem situations, yeah.
Hey, Katie, on line 6 there, put a space between district and review at the beginning of the
I
sentence.
see you, yep. Okay?
What, the final sentence under 8.27, in this case, the final action by the Historic District Review Board should be taken prior to consideration of proposals.
Well,
requires
the
that
Board of
approval.
Zoning Appeals can say, ooh, I want the Historic Board to review it first.
Right.
So flipping and saying, in this case, final action by the Historic Board, we take prior to the Board of Zoning Appeals. I don't know what would drive them that way, but that's the purpose there.
Okay? And again, I just want to point out this last change under 8.28. This is really important, because typically, currently, we were actually not issuing the C of A until 30 days had passed from the vote of approval. I don't think it's our responsibility to be their babysitters. And so I really appreciate this section getting updated. We will issue it. We are making them aware, you can proceed at your own risk, but there's a right of appeal. So any work you do may get overturned. So it's up to you if you want to move forward, or you want to wait the 30 days for the appeals process to wear itself out.
Well, we did that before, didn't we?
So,
No, we
No.
were waiting 30
We were
days.
waiting 30 days.
And it was even odder, because in certain cases, I saw the board, now this is going back a couple of years, the board agreed to foundation work. Proceed with foundation work and wait for the balance for 30 days. But it's like, okay, so where is that written?
Yeah.
Now it's written.
So,
But there's a sentence in there, maybe I'm not reading it right, but the applicant gets the certificate of appropriateness and he wants to appeal?
No.
maybe
No.
not him. He may not appeal. He may not like your conditions, so he could appeal some of the conditions you put on that, for example.
Oh,
Or the neighbor could appeal.
Yeah,
They
in
didn't like
this-
your decision and they didn't want that neighboring property to get approved. They have the right to appeal because they have an interest in the
Okay.
action.
And that would be the
Okay.
more likely case of
Right.
this occurring. They get to see appropriateness, maybe with some conditions, but then somebody external just says, hey, wait, I don't like this, I'm appealing.
Okay, so I was thinking this referred to the applicant, I thought it
It's
said.
anybody has the right to appeal who has a vested interest. And there's a definition who has that vested
Okay.
interest.
Okay,
Yes.
all right, got it. Thank
Okay?
you.
Why is there that 30-day period?
Well, you're allowed 30 days to appeal almost any decision. Any zoning decision of this nature, there's a 30-day appeals timeframe afforded under the Code of Virginia. You can appeal decisions of the zoning administrator, you can appeal decisions of the Board of Zoning Appeals, you can appeal decisions of the town council. And they tell you where you have to go see those appeals or hear those appeals in various jurisdictions. Could be the clerk of court, circuit court, it could be to the BZA of my decisions, things of that nature.
Okay.
But otherwise, after 30 days, that's a final decision, no take back. Moving through, it talks about the appeals under 8.33. And this is very specific of the appeals of the Historic District Review Board decisions and where that appeals process goes through. And it is to town council, and it outlines that process. Okay?
I have a question about appeals. Is the appeal about the process or is the appeal about the specific decision?
The specific decision.
Is that outlined in here? Because I've never read it that way.
Well, the very first sentence for 833 says, an appeal from a decision from the Historic Review Board.
So it's not based on the process at all?
No.
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 But I'll just say, if you go into circuit court, you know, as the ultimate,
Right,
they're gonna look at, did you follow the process?
right, right, absolutely.
And that sentence, council members having any relevant interaction with the applicant, can that term relevant be any more specific, like details or some other, relevant interaction doesn't really, to me, tell you much.
I'm willing to drop the word relevant,
Okay, then any
any
interaction.
interaction.
Okay, that'd be improvement, yeah.
I'm not sure you wanna go there because, you know, if I walk into Andrew's store and I just have a conversation with him, then that potentially, you know, he's gotta disclose everybody that talked to him.
Right, it should be relevant to the business at hand.
The whole idea is you can't.
You can't
pull in
discuss
some
the case.
documentation that wasn't already presented.
Correct.
And if somebody else has that documentation, regardless of how it came about, you still can't present it. And this just protects the,
The term relevant is a good
Yeah.
legal term.
I wanna
protects the
go,
right parties from that.
sorry,
Go
I
ahead.
wanna go back up to that same thing, 8.33, the first sentence,
Mhm.
where it says an appeal of a decision can be made by the, can be taken to the town council. And you are saying that, or everyone is saying that, it will be not only the decision, but they will say, did you follow the process? Does the town council, I'm assuming the town council is doing that, since very few things are going before them. So are we saying then that when it goes before the council, they are checking the process, and then they are looking at the decision.
The zoning administrators, it says it here, they will prepare the record, and they will supply that. So they will prepare the application, that which will show the dates received, the dates that went to the Historic District Review Board. It will include the minutes and all the accompanying paperwork that went into that consideration. We will prepare the hearing record that will go to town council for them to consider as part of their appeals hearing. So they can determine and judge from the appeals record that we give them, did we comply with the ordinance requirements? Yes.
And if they question a decision, they're just questioning a decision, they're not.
Well, what's being appealed is the decision of the Historic District Review Board.
So
Okay,
it doesn't result automatically in other changes,
No,
other changes that have to be made.
no.
Please.
So it's interaction related to the appeal that has to be disclosed, okay?
Right, exactly.
Okay? Moving our way through, we are almost there. So as we mentioned, I think that concludes all of Article 8. And as I said, we're gonna move all the definitions into Article 2.
On the section 3, 8.36, that reference paragraph
Violations and penalties,
2.4.3.
2.4.3.
And that's $250 per day, who said that?
It's set by the state, and I think we need to look at that again because they upped it to 1,000, I believe, for zoning issues.
I think we do need to look at that. Okay.
Okay, so moving on to Article 2? Or can we conclude Article 8 and maybe put together a recommended motion? Should I do that, Mr. Chairman, or should we finish Article 2 for the two definitions?
What are you looking for as a motion?
Do you think you would be prepared to make a recommendation this evening relative to Article 8, the review we just conducted on Article 8?
I think so.
Yes,
Well,
I agree.
yes.
With the changes that we've agreed to as
Yeah,
we
but-
Exactly. And we have an excellent crafter over here, and an excellent second over here. We can do this in a heartbeat.
Yeah, I have a clarification, but we were kind of midway in the process when Paul started introducing motions for changes, but is it only limited to those changes that were made through a motion process?
Yes.
Yes.
That's correct. So here's what I would propose as a potential motion. So you would recommend to the town council favorable consideration of Article 8 as presented to you this evening with the changes highlighted, I think they were in blue, or was struck through as presented in this document with the following amendments that you made this evening. To Section 8.15A, 8.16H, 8.18B, opening sentence, 8.18B3, 8.18C, 3C, and 8.18C, 3D, where you combine those two sections with all of those proposed edits. Move around Section 8.18 to be ahead of 8.16, and the further amendments you voted on of 8.20A and 8.24D.
So, will the council get
Oh,
a
yes.
copy of this with our changes on it, and a copy of this as we got it?
Yes.
I see.
Yeah.
And then they'll just make a decision.
Yeah,
between
can we
them,
get
kind of
one
the way we
revised copy that we can look at and vote on?
did. Yeah.
We've already voted.
Not tonight.
That,
Not tonight, no, but I mean, no, what are you talking about? Come on.
You wanna make that motion, Paul?
Yes, so move, I'll make that motion.
okay.
Second,
Okay, so you understand what's gonna happen here? So all the changes that we have made tonight
Well,
will be included.
With everything else you saw in this document. So every vote you took to change it, to amend it in some way,
Will be, and that will be our document.
Will be included
And
in
then he'll
this.
also have this document
Yes.
that you have here so that they can make the comparisons.
Right.
okay.
Let me just ask for a clarification. When this is written up, for each of those particular sections, you're going to, in your minutes, actually show
Yes.
what had been before and after.
Yes, we will.
Okay.
Yes, we will.
Exactly.
And I'll actually put our changes, these recommended amendments that we did tonight, I'm gonna put them in a different color.
All right, that's fine.
Okay. All right,
Okay?
so we have a motion and a second.
Yes, we do.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
All right. Katie, you're on a roll.
We're on a roll, we're almost finished, at least on this. So moving through, Article 2,
That's just complete, I wanna get home.
and I'm pretty much gonna leave this open, because we only have about 2 pages of definitions. So do you have any comments that you want to make on any of the proposed new definitions or additions to existing definitions that we are proposing go into this zoning ordinance document?
Well, we specifically talked about the design guidelines wording and standards wording.
Did that actually get adopted by motion? We talked about.
No, we did not, because it's Article 2. We haven't come to Article 2 yet.
Yeah, yes, so someone needs to make a motion on those two things.
Okay. So under the design
Oh.
guidelines,
Guidelines.
Thought it were-
and then
Design guidelines.
standards, I think that was the other one, is that correct?
So just to make sure it was adding definitions for standards and
Yep.
guidelines. Okay.
Yes.
The one other concern I had for the definition for non-contributing
Yes,
structure.
that's mine too, yeah.
All right, so let me offer an alternative.
Thank you.
I took the lazy path the first time. All right, so I went back and looked at what other people have done and kind of used. It's almost the opposite of contributing, but let me read it to you. Non-contributing structures are those that were built after 1964 or have been altered to such a degree that they are no longer representative of the period in which they were built or in such poor physical condition that their retention is difficult. The National Register of Historic Places, amended 2019, provides a listing of non-contributing structures and properties. Should the building or structure with the boundary, should a building or structure within the boundaries of the historic district not be listed in the National Register, the building or structure will be classified as non-contributing. Almost similar words that
Yes.
I'm contributing,
Yes,
okay?
much better, thank you.
All right.
Yeah.
Do you have that in writing already?
I do.
Can you give that to us?
That would be appreciated.
Can I take it from you? I'll get it back to you.
How do I know? I don't know where you live.
Unless she's moved in the last 10 years.
All right, so I'll make a proposed motion to change the definition of non-contributing structure as read.
Second.
I second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
We have design guidelines.
Now, the reference to design guidelines here are applicable to both historic district as well as historic harbor district. They have their own set of design guidelines, so it's kind of a generic term.
So should we use the word design in all of this? Or is guideline sufficient?
Design guidelines is a pretty standard term, and it's listed throughout Article 8 too, so.
Yeah, but I'm not sure if Article 8 says the word design in all cases.
We can go through that article and we can call it design guidelines and then just show the, in quotes, guidelines, so that it means the same thing.
Yeah.
We can fix that as a reference point, as an editorial point.
Yeah.
But you had words before.
You know,
Tracy's
I don't
rapidly
really like
scrolling.
this definition at all, as I feel
Are
it's
you?
not really a definition. And it's not very specific as to where to find those guidelines.
We can make it clear as to where you find them as adopted by the town. So that one, the town has to officially accept them and adopt them, and we can indicate that they're available on the town website, anything of that nature.
I mean, that's great, but
Yeah.
could we just say design guidelines, blah, 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 blah? In the case of the historic district, the guidelines are, and then use the title that's on the front page of the guideline.
Sure.
And you could do that, I mean, you could put the harbor review board in there also.
Actually, yes, because there's a problem with, said that, because this is specific.
keep a good man.
Specifically calls out the
Bruce is
historic
back.
review board and not the harbor board. So if these
No,
guidelines.
if this goes into Article 2, it's in general reference across all your zoning.
Right, but it specifically says that only the historic district review board will consult it when making decisions.
Well, that's a
Yeah.
problem.
So what I'm saying is, you just take out in the historic district review board, just say that the guidelines are parameters which will be consulted when making decisions. Don't say
Yeah,
who's gonna
that's
do it.
fine.
Just leave it generic for whoever needs to use it.
Yeah, get rid of that second sentence.
Yeah.
Guidelines of parameters,
I'd get rid of that.
totally?
Yeah.
Oh.
Because this is just a definition. Design guidelines are those sets of guidelines and recommendations adopted pursuant to section 8.2 and 9.20 of this code.
But if you go to those two sections,
It will tell you
It will tell you
that
what the
design
code is.
guidelines are needed and the board utilizes them.
but it doesn't say to anybody where to find the design guidelines or what they're called, or, I'm trying to just make this clear.
There's a lot of things, though. We don't tell people where to find the boundary map. We don't tell them
Well,
where
the
to.
boundary map is supposed to be a part of this. There shouldn't be no question, it should be in.
We don't tell them where to find the list of contributing there's a lot of things we don't tell them where to go find it.
But it should be. If it's stated in here that we're using it, then there has to
Well,
be a
that's
way
when
for
it-
anybody reading it to find it.
That's where this consultant is, you know.
We need a
But
consultant
I
to tell
thought,
us that.
but I
because it says
thought
we-
you just said, and Katie took it down about having it on the town website, is where
It
you find
is.
it.
It's already on the town
Right, right.
website.
What you're saying is, you want that in the definition.
I just want in the definition what it's called.
We can do that.
Okay, what that document is called and where it is located, it's fine.
If you go to the town website and you are looking for something with a specific name, it shouldn't be difficult to find it. You don't even have to say where you would find it there, just to say what it is, right? Am I right or wrong?
If you have a search on that website, which we do, and you type in the thing, it should tell you, it should go to it.
Does it? Okay,
Actually,
yeah.
any kind of reference that's in here, what the designer should be thinking about is like when you roll over 8.2, it's a link.
It'd be great if it was that. And
Now,
I-
that's a requirement, but that is I deal with these kind of things daily. That kind of
You wanna,
That kind of design in a document will make this a very useful one,
one of
and it
the,
will stay current.
one of the critiques I have of the current way we host the zoning ordinance, and John knows this and he's working on this,
Yeah,
is the zoning ordinance should actually be part of the entire municipal code for
Yeah.
the town of Cape Charles. It currently is not.
Okay.
So this document needs to get incorporated into that whole municipal code. So that when you type in Town of Cape Charles code, the whole thing comes up, you know, whatever their traffic violations are, or how your sidewalks are, zoning will be part of that document.
Okay.
It's not today.
And you
Right.
just go to a table of contents to find what you want to read.
Right. So that's why I'm a little hesitant to do what Diana's talking about or what you're talking about, Jim. I'm with you. There should be hyperlinks at some point in all this and that
Yeah.
kind of stuff. I don't think we're quite where we'd like to be yet.
It's our intent to move in that direction. We
Yes.
got it in the budget to do that after.
We gotta
get this
crawl
fixed.
before
They
we
charge-
walk.
They charge you by change. So
Yes, they do.
We're gonna fix it first.
Yeah,
Okay.
I got you.
We're gonna bring it over and put it all in one place.
Yeah.
So you are saying you don't want to put in the name of the guidelines?
I don't right now because there are two documents that get referenced in this. There's historic district and then there's also a harbor district.
Right.
And we need to keep this still generic for right now. I've made the note that that needs to be future additions when we get this updated again.
Then somewhere in section 8, the first time guidelines come up, can we say where it could be looked at?
Yes, yeah, I think we can do that in
Alright.
section 8, because that is specific to the Historic District Review Board,
Okay.
yes. Okay, anybody else have any other changes to any definition term?
You added on the standards, you talked about, your suggestion earlier was standards
Yep.
are zoning ordinance requirements.
Yes,
Adding those two words.
Yeah, that
But
thank
so
you,
need
I
a
knew there was
motion to
another
that
one.
effect.
Oh, I wrote it on yours, that's why I couldn't find it.
All right, so I'll make a motion to amend the standards definition to include standards or zoning ordinance requirements.
We have a second?
Second.
No, Ken did.
Ken,
You were sleeping.
So we have a motion and a second.
Mr. Grossman, just to clarify, what was the motion again?
To change the wording for standards to standards are zoning ordinance requirements.
All right, thank you.
All in favor?
aye.
Opposed?
If there are no other changes to the definitions, all right, I'm trying.
That's the
And
last
this is all
page.
red on this page in blue.
We're going to delete this, the last sentence. Yeah.
So we have decided.
Before we move on, Tracy's is letting me know, we never got a motion to strike the last sentence under design guidelines. We discussed it, but I didn't get a motion.
What section is that?
Under definitions,
Definitions.
design guidelines,
Okay.
and strike that second sentence in that definition.
Where are we?
All right, so I'll make that motion.
Second,
All in favor?
aye.
Opposed?
You have a motion?
Now,
Have we
Diane.
determined a specific period of significance?
Yeah, 1964.
No.
Go ahead, go ahead.
Period is a time frame.
Well,
From
19,
beginning
the
and end.
wording, I think, talks 1880, I think.
1886, right? Or is it 84?
Well, we have several different ones that are noted, so I think we should just pick one and go with it. I mean,
Well,
we got,
right
the town was originally made out in 1883, 84. And since the grid of the town is historic, perhaps we should use.
Well, it has here, right, in 8.3, the period of significance for the town will be from the 1880s to 1964.
Well, that's
Very
not
good.
very specific, is it? 1880s?
It's fine with me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's, I mean, can you give us a specific year in the 1880s?
Why not?
Well, you can just arbitrarily pick one?
Well, if the grid was being established in 1883, let's pick that date.
Well, why didn't somebody say that
What?
back then when they did this? Because it may not have been 83, it may have been 85.
And I don't have the words from the National Register, but I think that may be
That is the word.
their words also, 1880s to 1964. I don't have it with me.
According to the museum, it was established in 84, there's a charter in 86 for the town. Those two dates. You can buy a pennant at Moonrise that
You wanna
says
put
1884.
86 in there?
I would prefer it, or whatever. What did you just say?
I said there's a historic district pennant that says 1884, which a lot of people say, but the charter is 1886, I think.
All right, the district includes nearly the entire town as laid out in 1883-84. That's in the National Register.
Okay,
All right.
close enough.
Then 1884, right?
Oh,
It's finished in 1884, so,
Right.
I mean,
That's a good date.
Doesn't count?
yeah, I think
but that's when they started their work. It's just like when, if you get a certificate of appropriateness, it's when they started it or when?
Just give me this one, please.
Go, I don't care. 83, then do it. Damn.
83 to 1964.
All right, let's go.
All right, so that means we're going back to Article 8.
I'm making any of those changes.
Yeah, because right now, this period of significance is just a general term,
Yes, it is.
okay?
Yeah.
What you're looking to define is in section 8.3, changing that 1880s to, you said 1883? All right, so I'll make a motion to that effect on Article 8, 8.3, change 1880s to 1883.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
8.3? That's not right. That's 8.3. Oh, that's 8.30.
If I can just make one small tweak to that motion just now. So you're looking to amend open Article 8, make that change to section 8.3 to define the period of significance to 1883, and to further,
1964.
to 1964, and to further recommend that change to the town council for all of Article 8. Since you already made a motion to recommend all of Article 8.
That's correct.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
and to recommend to council.
Is the
Thank you.
Historic District Board happy with these definitions of preservation, reconstruction, rehabilitation? I know some of these are DOI, but some are not.
I was just curious as to the word standards, as opposed to, guidelines. Is that a legal,
Standards where
or just the
the
definition?
definition,
Is that because it's a legal, liability to use the word standards as opposed to guidelines?
One is not, are they synonymous, standards and guidelines?
No, they're not.
No.
No, they're not.
No, they're not.
They're not.
Standards are being used now to reference any of the requirements of the zoning ordinance, and guidelines are being referenced only for the Historic District Review Guidelines document.
So in our historic district review guidelines, we cannot use the word standards.
Yes, you can, because you're pulling in the Department of the Interior's 10 standards for rehabilitation.
Right.
That's their definition of
Right.
the 10
I
standards
see
for.
that, but it's confusing because when you go through our guidelines, the word standards is.
Well, okay, so when we do the design guidelines, we may have to clarify what that is, because it is confusing that people don't know guidelines versus standards, and in what context you're talking.
or standards versus DOI standards.
Yeah, we can clarify.
The way we interpret the standards is through Katie's staff reports. She gives us a standard of, say, the boundaries of the property lines, setback requirements, those are her standards, and she gives us those in the guideline, in her staff report. So it's really not, unless we say it's a standard of the windows, that's our standard
Correct.
based upon the guidelines.
Correct.
Her standards are really black and white.
Correct.
This is black and white.
That's correct.
In my staff report, we're calling that compliance, zoning compliance.
Right.
Yes.
Okay.
So we really kind of need a standard.
So I think we're okay actually on that. I really
Yeah,
do.
we're cool with it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Are we good?
Good.
Okay, so I would propose a motion that we accept what is recommended to you this evening, that in the document before you for Article 2, with the three proposed amendments we made to design guidelines, standards definition, and non-contributing definition.
I'll make the motion to approve it.
Second.
Discussion?
And we are recommending this to the town council with these proposed changes.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Can we get a copy of these changes? Of this whole thing when you redo it?
You sure will. Whatever I submit over to the town manager and council's office, you will get as well.
All right. Thank you. Very good. Thank you, everybody.
I
on
make
that.
a motion, we adjourn for the evening.
Well, we can't, because we have to do the new business here. Okay?
Oh, I'm sorry. Sorry.
We have to do the new
Not
business.
allowed to put it off.
Nope. Okay, new business, request to schedule a public hearing on the application for text amendments to the Cape Charles zoning ordinances, Article 3, Section 3.14.
Oh, this be me, sorry.
Yes, the text changes. Thank you.
So you do have a staff report that is in your packet. I'm not gonna go over that at length. You've all had a chance to review it. The bottom line is the town manager and myself have been meeting with the property owner, concerning a rezoning proposal. As part of that, we've been looking at the zoning ordinance sections to see if some of that language needed to be, considered for change that we think was more appropriate and in line with really what they were trying to use the property for, based upon their description of the use of the property, and probably to reconsider what they were considering for a rezoning into what district. So to that end, we did have and work with the property owner and the adjacent property owner who is considering purchasing this piece of property to make some proposed suggestions to the zoning ordinance. Those have been forwarded to the town council, and they took them up at their last meeting and felt that they were relevant improvements and improvements to the zoning ordinance, to section general business light industrial H1, section 3.14, and they are recommending that this move out to public hearing. So we are seeking your authorization to schedule a public hearing at your July meeting to move this forward for consideration.
Point of clarification, town council, did they see what those changes were? As opposed to just seeing the resolution to send it to planning commission?
They did not.
So I just want to be clear
Thank you.
that the resolution was, and it's going through our process, which we
Right.
perhaps hadn't been doing. Town council refers something to
Right.
you. I'm just saying, town council had not reviewed it in any detail. We just authorized a resolution to bring it to planning commission.
Okay, that's different.
We'll eventually get to it, but
Right.
I appreciate the clarification. Sorry if I misstated that in my staff report. So we are looking to do this as a public hearing, and I believe we would like to do this as a joint public hearing with town council. So if I can receive such authority this evening?
this is July 4th week.
How
I will
would
not.
you like public hearing be?
Just like we did this evening.
Yeah.
Right.
Council was here to hear any public input or comments that were received.
So,
So
And
the
then-
public input would have to be at the next meeting, not at the town council meeting.
Correct.
That's correct.
Correct.
And you would offer your recommendation,
but-
just like you're doing tonight on the other matter.
Yes.
was there requirement for discussion by the planning commission before a public hearing?
After the public.
After the public?
After the public hearing, again, just like we're doing this
Okay.
evening, you held your public hearing, and then now we have been deliberating for the
Oh,
last
okay.
2+
So-
hours.
Okay, nothing's finalized, it's
Right,
just the public.
so
Okay.
we're just looking for
Getting
you to
input,
authorize
getting
the
input.
staff to start the public hearing process, get it advertised and all that stuff,
Okay.
and you'll take it all up at your next meeting.
Got it, thank you.
So I'll make a motion that we set July 6th for joint town council public commission, public hearing for the text amendment for 3.14. And can I say also, and for zoning, rezoning of parcel 90-8-1A1, or do I have to do it separately?
You can bring it
All
all
right,
into
so
one
for
motion, I'm
both of
okay
them.
with that.
Okay, for both.
Second.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second for both A and B there. I just want to make sure that the planning commissioners know that the parcel that was in the packet is not correct as far as looking at it. This parcel here is not, this is not correct either. The parcel,
Oh, no.
the parcel is next to that.
No,
Okay.
no, resend it, resend it.
It's parcel 90-8-1A1.
No, this one is correct.
No, it's not. It's the one next to that.
Left or right?
It's a one to the left.
Okay.
Okay, that's what it is. All you have to do is look at the diagram that was submitted, and it'll show you,
No, this is, the property that they're talking about that's owned by Southport is the one that circles
okay,
the Fujifilm,
I know, it's the one,
and that's that little
it's
section
right.
there.
No, that Fuji thing, if you look at the schematic that came in with the application, it shows that the Fuji thing is to the right on there.
No, I went through the maps.
All right. I'm
Okay,
gonna
well,
suggest
whatever,
that staff
okay.
Review that and send us a change, an official change.
I don't think a change is necessary.
No changes
I think this is correct.
You
Is
think
it?
that what we got last was correct?
By the county GIS. This was in the blue, sorry, I got my little thing over top of it. Can't move it. That's the parcel,
That part.
okay?
So that was.
So it's the same thing, so it is?
It's
So
the
it's what,
same thing
it's this
that you're
that
seeing.
surrounds.
Yes.
Okay, I stand corrected.
Same thing
All right,
that you
so
have
it is
before you.
corrected. Okay. That is correct.
Thank you for
Okay.
having good internet service on
Thank
your.
You're
All
welcome.
right, all right.
Do we have stip zoning still, or whatever that's called?
No, that got changed in 2010, I think.
Well, that's up for debate.
It did. Council voted it.
Yeah, but I mean, we don't have a zoning map, an approved zoning map
That shows
that shows that, correct?
No, actually, well, that could be administrative change, because the council took legal action of changing the names, or just changing the map as an administrative function, and we just not done yet.
So what used to be stip is now
M2.
M2.
PD step is the GBI H1.
Okay. All right,
Okay?
so, Mr. Planner, can we do the other business and put that off? I hate to say that, but I mean, it's really late.
It is getting late. But the one thing I would ask for, since this is more of a long project and it is a bit time sensitive, I do believe under state law we are required to have it done by the end of the year because it's once every 5 years.
Yeah, but we didn't have a a
No.
pandemic.
I understand, I understand.
No,
No, I'm not asking that we address this tonight, but is there a chance that we could do?
Well,
we have so many, go ahead, Bill.
let me say this.
Sure.
Now that you're on board,
Yes,
we can go back to our work sessions,
Yes.
all right?
okay,
So our work sessions are normally the third Tuesday, third Monday.
third Monday.
We had a problem before with the previous planner, I guess, the date.
Okay.
So third Monday
Monday,
at 3 o'clock to 5.
3 to 5.
Oh, okay, because I was going to ask for a special session, but if there's a work session already.
And we will pick up where we left off the last time. And I think the next, the review would be on the economy, because that was the next in the barrel, all right? The chapter on economy.
Okay.
We've already done housing, and we've already done the environment,
Yes, I saw those.
okay? So,
Okay, but there's other pieces that, I've got an updated housing section that I
Right.
sent, and we have the second section for an environment that I had worked with Mike on, I've already forwarded, so the
so maybe
appendix.
we can also take a
So
look at
there's,
those
yeah,
too.
there's the introduction and the table of contents, there's more than what you have posted, so I sent that to you this afternoon.
Yes, yeah, I got those emails.
So
So,
we will get that distributed to everyone,
Yeah.
yes.
And also, I'm sorry, just be stickler, but it was a motion to set the public hearing, but I didn't hear a vote. Did
Yeah,
you
good,
vote on
good
it?
point.
They
good
did.
point.
We did.
Yeah, they did.
Yep.
yeah,
Sorry.
I didn't hear it, I apologize.
yeah.
It'll be the 15th, right?
So, yes, would that be the 15th? I guess it would be, right?
It's the third Tuesday.
The third,
Do you want to do them starting this summer immediately, or?
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay,
We have to.
okay.
If I want to stay the third Monday.
Right. No, we changed it because of things, but the third Monday has always been, and that's right,
Okay, so plan for third Monday to discuss
this month.
this month,
Well, the
to
third
discuss
Monday is
this.
the 21st.
The third Monday of this
Of
month
June.
no, it's the 21st.
21st?
It's the 21st.
Is the
Yes.
15th, third Monday.
6/21 would be your first
Today's the
work
first.
session. You're correct.
Or 20, yeah, or 20th. Oh, whoa. It's on a Monday, right?
It's a
Yeah.
Monday. The third Monday
Okay.
is
All right, Tuesday.
6/21.
Okay, that's fine.
And sorry,
And
just
it'll be here.
to make sure, what time does the snow?
3 to 5.
3 to 5.
3 to 5.
21st.
We will confirm it's here. We need to check the calendar availability for this space.
Yeah, right.
So we will be in touch with you to confirm that that's true.
Okay.
Now we need to get it posted.
And since this is after June 1, it will not be reflected in the June calendar that
That's correct.
Libby sent out.
That's correct. Okay.
Okay. Are we good?
Yeah.
Make a motion that we adjourn.
Do we have to make a motion that we don't do the comprehensive plan?
Nope,
Okay, all right.
because we just discussed.
So
We're
I have a
good.
motion, or I have a second?
Second. Well, go ahead.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.